Good afternoon, everyone. Is IT on? All right, thank you, sir. All right, good afternoon. Today is August 21st, 2023, and I'm going to call this city council meeting to order. Up first is going to be the invocation by Steve Ferris, Pastor Steve Ferris.
Lord in heaven and earth, we just thank you for your goodness and grace. We thank you, Lord, again for these who donate their time and their energy. And Lord, we ask for you to give them wisdom and guidance in all that we do. Lord, we thank you for this great nation. And Lord, just having returned from third world countries, we don't understand how blessed we are here. So let us not forget to thank you for your goodness and your grace upon us. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Councilwoman Aber.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. You may be seated. All right, at this time, I will accept an approval of the agenda or any modifications.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to pull item 3H.
3H. Any other items to pull? Seeing none,
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
all right. Calling the vote. Johnny.
Mr. Mayor, can I pull 3C?
Oh man, I thought no one was gonna do that. Look at that. Yep. All right, is everyone okay with the second?
I am.
All right. All right, so finish that up. So we're pulling 3C, 3H. All right, ayes have it, so moved. All right, up first is going to be the proclamation, suicide prevention proclamation. And if I can get Ms. Sabina Zinguzzi to join me up here. All right, the City of Destin Proclamation, National Suicide Prevention and Action Month. This is for month of September. Whereas with September being recognized as Suicide Awareness Month, the National Suicide Prevention and Action Month proclamation was created to raise the visibility of mental health and proactive suicide prevention resources in our community. We also want to start the conversation around the idea of suicide prevention and help connect people with the appropriate support services. And whereas, according to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, suicide is the second leading cause of death among individuals between the age of 10 and 34, with more than 48,000 people dying by suicide annually in the United States. Whereas, according to the Hope for the Day, with an average of 132 suicide completed daily, and each one directly impacting 100 additional people, including friends, service members, family, social media connections, and neighbors, we can safely assume everyone can be impacted by suicide. And whereas the City of Destin publicly places its full support behind those who work in the field of mental health, education, and law enforcement, thank you guys. Whereas Fatisa Zinguzzi Foundation from Suicide Prevention envisions a world free from social stigmas surrounding mental health. To that end, as part of its effort, the foundation has established the Okaloosa Suicide Prevention and Support, SPS group, in recognition of the need for broader outreach and suicide prevention activities, and is dedicated to raising awareness about suicide and its effects to everyone in the county. And whereas we encourage all residents to take time to understand mental health through education and recognizing that we need to take care of our mental health while taking care of each other. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Bobby Wagner, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2023 as National Suicide Prevention and Action Month in the City of Destin, and recognize all citizens and encourage all citizens to join together in the community in any way that is personally meaningful. So with that, if you guys want to take a moment to explain your nonprofit and mission.
So first of all, we'd like to take this moment to thank the City of Destin for putting the issue of suicide front and center. This proclamation honors all of those in our city who are suffering in silence. And with this proclamation, we hope that we can encourage those who are suffering that they are not alone. We would just want to say suicide does not end with the month of September alone. We are touched with this disease every day. Suicide happens to all of us, despite your economic status, your race, your age, or gender. We hope this is the beginning of assisting our citizens to speak up and find the help they need. Our foundation is here to collaborate with any organization, company, or individual in whatever way we can. And this we'll do through our Okaloosa SPS. Our dream is that both our children and adults can easily find professionals for the help they need and also get the services, hopefully affordable, without the fear of stigma. Let us all remember that talking about suicide does not encourage, rather, it helps those who are suffering get help they need. Together, we can help our citizens in this great city alleviate the stigma that comes with suicide and mental health in general. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
She wants to talk to you after.
And then just on a final note, I definitely think that it hits everyone personally. I know for me, I've had classmates in high school, friends in college, and family members as an adult go through it. Some made it, some haven't. So I really appreciate what you guys do. It means a lot to me. All right, at this time, we are going to get into the public comments. It'll be 3 minutes. Anything on the public hearing will have its own time, and that will be the time to speak on those topics for 5A and 5B. Please come up to the mic one at a time, name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes. There may or may not be a buzzer, but I will kind of give you a wrap it up signal if you guys go over. All right, with that time, I'm going to start on my right and work my way to my left. Anyone on this side? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Melody Ziegler, address 516 Noriego Drive, and I'm also Vice President of the Holiday Isle Homeowners Association. I wanted to speak to the council tonight so that you're aware of the HIIA's opposition to the 25% MPEP net positive environmental benefit being misinterpreted by staff of City Policy 6-1.2.3, protect water quality within Destin Harbor. Multiple association homeowners have been told by city staff that a 25% fee of the overall construction cost will be levied for seawall docks, slips, boat lifts, etc. This includes not only new projects, but replacement projects. This new interpretation has been stated by staff to not only include harbor-facing properties, but canals. This new interpretation has been stated by, code language has been changed from Destin Harbor to Destin Harbor and canals adjacent to the Destin Harbor. We question the legality of the implementation of this change without it being properly vetted. If the change to add fees to repair projects is continued, homeowners will be discouraged from repairing dilapidated seawalls and docks because of the heavy additional cost. NPEB was to maintain the environmental impact of the harbor. Replacement and repair projects lead to less runoff and actually cleans up the underwater areas around these projects. The HIIA has a strong history of working with the city on issues such as this adversely affect our 2,000-member association. We would like to suggest that you withhold any NEPBs on any HIIA's canals and any projects on the harbor that is replacing or repairing under the LDC rewrite until the LDC rewrite is complete. And we respectfully request that we are allowed inputs into the rewrite. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, anyone else?
Can you hear it?
There you
I
go.
just
Yep,
let go.
yep.
Okay, sorry. I'm Nikki Noblin. I live at 501 Gulf Shore Drive, and I'm the president of Holiday Isle, which I'm kind of regretting right now because I'm having to stand up and talk in front of everybody in Destin. But we do have a lot of people that are concerned about the impact fee, especially people that have older properties. We've got a lot of people out there, y'all, they didn't spend a lot of money on their property. I mean, the great thing about Holiday Isle is we've got a lot of demographics out there and a lot of inexpensive waterfront. And I'm on the ARB as well. We're really, really every day kind of fighting unpermitted work, and I don't want people to do unpermitted work because of additional fees. And we're constantly turning people into the city that aren't, you know, permitting their dock work and doing stuff on the water. So I just want to y'all to take that in consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for the idea on the sign as well. All right, anyone else? Middle? Seeing none. Far right? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Lynn Schmidt. I'm the president of the board on Destin Harbor Resort West. I'm not good at speaking publicly, so bear with me. When we found out there's a 25% fee increase charged on, as I called in, I was told labor and material only. But if you look at all the bids, they come in, almost everything says material and labor. We just had a bid, multiple bids come in for us to have our seawall redone. Our community that I live in is 24 units. The majority of the people in our units, or at least 65 up into 87. The impact of a 25% fee to have anything done on the canal is we're currently being insuranced out by it going up over 100%. And now with the insurance and all the reserves that were required, we went from $75,000 a year to over $170,000 a year. So I just want to have you think about that when you do go 25. I don't even know where you arbitrarily got the 25% to approve it or come up with it, but there are a lot of people that don't have a lot of money, that we're struggling to stay here because we love it here. And I've lived here almost 5 years, but I also have been here for almost 30 years, every year, religiously coming because I love it here so much. So I'm just asking you to think about that when you put a 25% fee on existing. If you could, I mean, people are willing to pay a fee, but 25 is kind of outrageous. So anyway, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for being here. All right, anyone else? Far middle? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Marcy Gregg. I am the owner of Forever Lawn Emerald Coast, who is an artificial turf installation company. Again, I'm not a good speaker either and feel very underprepared, but I am wanting to further discussions on number 4E, the minimum stormwater management system requirements, definition of vegetation. Same idea, the land development code, the way it is stated presently, there is an exception for single-family dwellings. And until the rewrite has been completed, the stipulations and permits that are being requested without full depth of knowledge and going back and forth, which is incurring more fees, and the additional testing needed that is upwards of $5,000 per property, is intense, and I feel that it needs further discussion and less permitting, I guess.
Thank you so much. All right, anyone far left? Seeing none, I will close the public comments at this time, and we will move, let's do the consent, and then we'll go C3. So I'll entertain a motion
I'll
for...
make that motion to approve the consent agenda minus C and 3H.
All right, do I hear a second? Second. All right, calling the vote. All right, ayes have it, so moved, and we will start it with C3. So Johnny, you want to go first? You've pulled it.
Yeah, just, I think that, I know there's been a lot of discussion about this and a lot of, I've seen a lot of outcry on both sides of this deal. I'm I'm for this. I think that it would be wise for us to, I think it would be wise for us to contribute some conditions if possible. I think it kind of goes back. We saw where the big inflatables and big stuff was done and gone for a while, and then just kind of back. And I've been out there, and it's some of the bigger stuff. I love the small vendors. I think they're small in stature vendors, the smaller boats. So I would like to see us if possible, to put a condition on it that it's, a size restriction. If you drive past Crab Island, you don't hardly notice the peanuts or the coconuts or the ice cream boats zipping in and out. They kind of blend in with everything. It's the big, greasy restaurants out there that I have pause about. So I'd like to hear y'all's perspective on that.
Councilwoman Aber?
I agree that putting some restrictions in place, I've been out there, and I am happy that we have a lot of entrepreneurial businesses like, the Coconut Girl that came and spoke to us, started out with 1 and now she's got 10. It's been suggested from several residents and those that, live here and that do visit it, especially when it's in the slower time frame, that having, say, 10 coconut boats, instead of them all zipping in and out, having them like anchor and locate throughout Crab Island so that they're not all like constantly zipping around people and having people go to them, like how it's set up now for those to go to, like the Reef Burger place, which I think you're trying to say basically small in stature. Johnny, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, like if we had a vessel size, something like that would permit those type of businesses.
Right, so having the smaller businesses, but having maybe, okay, you can have 10, but instead of all 10 zipping in around, locate 1 over here, 3 over here, 2 over here, so that they keep people within the safety of the Crab Island to walk to them without having to, have those constantly maneuvering around people that are coming in and parking. It gets kind of crazy, so that's my thoughts.
All right, Councilman Guile?
I don't know how we would regulate it if you start putting stipulations and rules. We already have code enforcement's already backed up. I mean, I've been going down to the harbor trying to assist as much as I can, some of these other outsides. So when you start putting limitations or sidebars, I don't know how we would enforce that.
Yeah.
Really. So if you did it, I think we need to be real clear on that. And we can't count on the citizens, because I see several citizens while I'm down there just finding ways to skirt around the code and hope they don't get caught because they realize the code enforcement's too backed up to get down there and deal with it. So I don't know that I would be in support of trying to separate out. I think it would have to be an all or nothing deal for me, just because I don't know how we'd regulate it or keep it in check.
Yeah, and I agree, and I don't think as a city we really have any authority. My intention and hope for this resolution and where it goes is that regardless of the vision, I love the ideas that are up here, but that's the idea of this resolution, is to make sure that the ideas and how we can work with the county to make a Crab Island that we can all love, appreciate, and preserve the environment, is that we keep it local and we allow the local governing body to make those decisions and not give it away to the National Park Association or services. So I love where this is all going, but I also want to, just for everyone's record of why I was really so passionate about this resolution, is that I believe keeping the power local and not giving it away, because the second we give it away to the National Park Service, it's gone forever and we will be forever at their mercy. There's a lot of things that we need to do better with, but I believe over the past few years we have done a great job of addressing those issues. And now we just need to continue doing that at the local level because we proved that we can. So I'm hoping that this resolution as a whole, and I hope we don't get too carried away, even though I agree with a lot of these ideas, is that this resolution is all about making sure and saying that we want to have the power to come up with our own future of Crab Island and not hand off this power to a federal agency to never see it again. So I just wanted to, while we're throwing out ideas, I also wanted to just give some clarity of what I was hoping this resolution would bring to the table, and hopefully the county will back us up as well. So, Councilman Schmidt?
Thank you. And Mr. King, I I hear what you're saying, and I think there's some good ideas to talk about that, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe when I was reading through this, most of the language is about kind of what Mr. Wagner was saying, but a lot of the language was about in coordination with the federal government to do things and to, you know, in cooperation. It was not necessarily about the specifications of how many or how large or how small. It was just more of a, you know, we want to work in partnership with these federal organizations rather than just a slam of the fist type of thing. So I don't disagree with you about doing some things, but I think the way this one was written by staff and city attorney, it's to kind of just show support for the big picture, I guess, right now, I think.
Well put.
Okay.
Councilman Destin.
And I would point out, we have no jurisdiction out there. And if we had jurisdiction out there to try to regulate the size of the boats, the way the boats can congregate, I mean, that's just way beyond our expertise. The resolution, in fact, says just one thing, that we support Congressman Gates in his attempt to see that the regulations be done in coordination with the local government. If local government says we don't want to do it, well, then that's where we are. But you know, it's the resolution just asks for that. So we can't possibly get into the details of trying to regulate an area that's not in our jurisdiction at all.
Why did it get brought to us in the, oh, sorry, I just.
Councilman Bagby, and I'll get you next.
Thank you, because I'm going to echo Mr. Destin. This is a sense of council resolution. That's all it is. It's the sense of the council. We don't have a dog in this fight. The county controls that. The National Park Service controls that. The federal government controls that. We're not going to regulate anything, and we're not going to coordinate, quite honestly, anything. He's asking that they ask us for our input. This is our input. We'd like to see what's out there, stay out there. But we don't have a dog in this fight because we don't have any jurisdiction. We cannot regulate a single thing out there. So, you know, we can talk for the next hour, but it's not going to change it. We just need to either pass or not pass a sense of the council resolution. That's all we're here to do. Thanks.
All right, Johnny.
Yeah, and I'm in total agreement with what everybody's saying. I'm trying to figure out why. I understand the item. I'm not trying to regulate anything at Crab Island, but if they want our input, that was my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong about that. But I'm with you. I'll support it. I just
I can answer that.
Yeah.
So I got briefed in the middle of the summer by the director and deputy director of the region for the National Park Service, so the National Island Seashore, which is hundreds of miles. They briefed me that, you know, this project that had been in the works for years is now kind of coming to a head. We have our potential RFP kind of questionnaire and our bullet points of what will and won't be considered a viable business out there. And that's when I got a little concerned that they were overreaching, and they kind of, in an effort to resolve the issue, they've kind of gone haywire. And that's when I talked to U.S. Representative Matt Gates about it, and he kind of started going to bat for us. So it was just me getting briefed by the director for the National Park Services, and then me turning around and expressing my concerns to our representative at the Congress. Because at the end of the day, the National Park Service falls under the Department of Interior, and so that's a Congress level into their agency. So that was our way of trying to make sure at all levels of government that our voice is heard. All right. Seeing no further discussions, seeing none, I'll call the vote. Yep. Oh, sorry. I'm calling for a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 2023-17, direct the city clerk to forward it as directed in the resolution.
Second.
Motion is second. Calling the vote. All right. Ayes have it. So moved. Up next, 3H.
Appreciate it. I pulled this item because the previous motion, as you see, got, on July 17th was in relation to having staff and city manager prepare a policy for offboarding employees, specifically in regards to when they're terminated, to having IT access and emails and network access terminated. And after seeing the agenda item, I didn't see that inside this policy. And so I was wanting to bring it up tonight to send it back. And this time I'd like to make a motion to have city attorney, IT director, and the city manager and HR director all work together to incorporate what the wishes were in the original motion.
Yeah.
When I spoke this morning on our meeting, there was no mention of IT being terminated, removed access as an out-processed employee. So Lance mentioned that we could add that in there.
Okay, Councilman Destin, want to add to that?
Maybe I didn't read the item correctly, but it appeared the item said there was no action to be taken. This was just a report, or did I have that wrong?
Well, it does say no actions to be taken, but I believe when we asked them to provide a policy, this was a policy.
I agree with you. We direct them to take action.
Yes.
So I would think that we should have a policy in front of us to approve.
Is this what we're looking? Yeah,
Yeah, that's.
I agree with you. Yeah, we should be having a policy, and I
Yeah,
don't see it.
and if that's not what this agenda item is, it's what it should be.
Right. So I can make another motion, or we can try again next time.
City Attorney, what's your opinion of what we have
We
before us
can, we
tonight?
can bring it back in a resolution form with the policy attached for you to formally approve. And we can clarify the IT issues. I know it does say return property of the city, but we can clarify it even further and talk about actually terminating the services of the technology as well and all of that.
Okay, and
We
if-
can bring it back.
If the motion is directing the city attorney to do that at the next meeting, this is not real complicated, I wouldn't think.
That's the motion.
I'll second it.
City attorney or the?
Manager?
City manager.
Manager.
Yeah, I think that's the manager would be.
City manager or the city attorney as well.
Well, the city attorney writes.
City attorney writes the legal resolution policy.
If the city manager wants to tell the city attorney, but the city attorney works for us,
Yeah,
gets a little.
yeah. I do have one thing.
Yeah, jump in, you're good.
Yeah, the other thing that was missing, it was kind of in there, but when I met with staff today, it was not clear that the discretion of the city manager, they could keep their phone for up to 90 days. I believe maybe it was 60 or 90. We discussed it the last time this was discussed. I mean, I've been gone for 8 months from One Seagrove, and they still call me. They called me last week. So, you know, if we want somebody to answer the phone, you know, at least give them a period at the city managers. And it's kind of in there, as the staff was explaining to me, but it's not explicitly stated. It needs to be explicitly stated at his discretion for up to whatever period of time.
All right, Councilman Destin, anything further?
I was just wondering if you still have your phone after 8 months that they gave you.
Well, our system, yes, our system was they paid me to have my phone, so they paid me per month.
Oh, so
And
it's-
I used my phone. They never gave me a phone because I didn't want to have their phone. So,
Apples and oranges, huh?
not exactly.
Anything else?
The city manager and I can work on it together and come back with the policy next meeting.
Awesome, good deal, thank you so much. All right, we've got a first and a second, call the vote. All right, ayes have it unanimously. All right, moving on, city manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4A is a paid parking update from Mr. Michael Burgess that was requested from council.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Back in March of this year, when we were having the discussions about the parking fees and the rates, I believe Councilor Schmidt wanted a kind of a after-action report for the implementation, and we're prepared to give some of that tonight. We've only had the rate changes in for about 10 weeks or so, 11 weeks, but I'll be presenting some data that we've collected thus far. Next slide, James, please. Okay, a little summary timeline of where we've come from. Starting back in 2008, we started purchasing property and developing it for public parking, and all the way through the most recent change being in May of 2023, It's when we implemented the new rate fee schedule. Next slide, please, James. Thank you, sir. Harbor District. I'm going to focus on the Harbor District for a moment, and we're going to talk about what it's comprised of and its rates. It's approximately 300 spaces. Consists of 3 parking areas to include the Seibert Avenue lot, which has about 75 paid spaces. The Destin Community Center has about 82 paid spaces. And the Marler Street parking lot has about 143 paid spaces. Now, what I did not include in those space counts were handicap parking spaces because those aren't paid spots. Pre-May 19th of 2023, we charged a $5 daily rate with no overnight parking. And subsequent to that, on May 19th, we changed that to a $15 daily rate. Same rule applies, no overnight parking. There was further discussion after these rate changes concerning a non-resident parking pass. So frequent users of the Harbor District parking lots could pay a single price and use it as much as they wanted. And to date, we have distributed 28 of those Harbor parking passes. Next slide, please, James. All right, let's go to the beach. So in the beach parking, have about 135 spaces, consisting of 7 parking areas. Gulf Shore Drive, kind of one of our larger ones, 43 paid spaces. Hutchinson, 12. Barracuda, 7. Pompano is 27. Terracotta, and these are the names we give them for Passport. 12. Shira, 10. Noriego, the little parking lot at the dead end of Gulf Shore Drive, call that one Noriego. It has 24 paid spaces, but as the slide says, it's currently being used for the Noriego Road Extension construction project staging, and it's been that way since mid-March of this year. Pre-May 19th, the rate was $5 for 5 hours, so $1 an hour, no overnight parking. And then subsequent to the change, the rate is now $20 for 4 hours, or $5 an hour, with no overnight parking. So those are our lots and basically their composition and rate schedule. Okay, this slide right here, I told Lance this is going to be my shameless plug for our 2 annual parking pass programs. Destin residents, all they have to do is go to City Hall and they can get a free parking pass. It's applicable at all city-paid parking facilities. You can get up to 2 per household. All you have to do is drop by City Hall, 4200 Indian Bayou Trail, Destin, Florida, between 8 and 5, Monday through Friday. And all you have to do is bring your driver's license and the vehicle registration for the vehicle that you're attempting to get a decal for. These decals are good on an annual basis from January 1st through the end of the year. And to date, now this is to date, when I say to date, this means the end of July, because I'm sure we've given out a few since then, but about 1,700 of those resident passes have been distributed. Okay, our non-resident Harbor District parking passes, that was a new addition for this year. They are $205 for a annual pass. They are non-transferable. They're applicable in the Harbor District only. That's Marler Street, Community Center, Seibert Avenue. You can get an unlimited number of passes per household. Again, available at City Hall Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. All you need, again, is to bring your driver's license and registration, and they're good for the calendar year, the same as the Destin resident passes. And to date, again, this was as of about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we've distributed 28 of those. And I think that number is still good.
Mr. Berg, just a question.
Sure.
Are we able to do it online? Can we register online?
No, sir. You need to bring your driver's license and vehicle registration by.
Ouch. All right,
you know,
Andy.
it literally takes less than 5 minutes.
Oh, man, but I don't, okay. Continue.
Is that accurate? You can do it online.
Yeah.
You can definitely do it online. You have to come pick it up in person.
You can do it, well, yes, you can, yes, you can. I don't know what I was thinking.
On the Parks and Recreation page on the website, there's a link to it.
But we really want to see your bright, smiling face at City Hall, 4200. So, okay, sorry about that. All right. Next slide, please, James. All right. This fellow here in the GIF here is Maxwell Smart. And he has trouble with things sometimes, figuring things out, and I do too. With these metrics that this passport portal generates, it's all 100% accurate, but there are some things, some factors that we cannot account for. Number one, the frequency, and we're going to be talking about these things in the next couple of minutes. The frequency of Destin resident parking pass use. We have no means of tracking how frequently folks use those passes at our various parking areas. Same holds true with the non-resident pass. They do not create a session in Passport, and digitally, we don't know that they're there. The community center has parts dedicated for their patrons. There are paid parking spots when the community center isn't open, but there are several spaces in the front that are dedicated toward patrons of the community center, and they don't have to pay to park there. A couple of years ago, council directed staff to make Sunday mornings free to park at the Marlar Street lot, so we don't have a means of tracking that. The city has, for several years, had a handicap parking exemption. If you have a tag or placard for handicap parking and you're not in a handicap parking space, you do not have to pay to park. Bad parking practices. I'm sure we're all familiar with these. Folks that park close to or over the line, parking in areas not designated as spaces, yet paying, or parking in some of our spots and not paying. We'll get to that later as well. Long vehicles in the parallel parking spots on Gulf Shore Drive. Parallel parking spots 9 feet by 22 feet. A Ford F-250 is about 22 feet long. So it can occupy almost the entire length of the parking space. If you get a couple of those vehicles parking adjacent to each other, it can create issues for vehicles trying to parallel park. Double parking of LSVs. We see that pretty frequently, where a space that's 22 feet long can accommodate possibly 2 or more LSVs. And then lastly, the effects of competition. I think we're all aware that other venues around Destin have have converted their parking into paid parking. So we can't factor in the effects of competition. All right, next slide, please. Thank you, sir. Okay, this slide right here covers from March of 2020 through July of 2023. And that's just the graphic. And you can kind of see the bell curve shaped annual distribution of sessions created. So in 2020, of course, we were experiencing COVID. And then in 2021, 2022 was kind of a return to normalcy. And then in 2023, up until April, it was kind of following that same pattern until the rate change. And that happened in May of 2023, so you'll see that rapid increase. Revenues generated, this is net, minus taxes and fees, has been steadily, well, in 2021, it was almost 400,000. 2022, about 370. 2023, and of course this is just through July 31st of this year, 553. And throughout the remainder of this year, if everything holds true last year, if everything's the same this year as it was last year, we're expecting about 15,000 additional transactions through the end of fiscal 23. Okay, James, next slide. Okay, I want to focus for just a moment on the Marlar Street parking lot. These are transactions during what I called the season. So this will capture spring break through July 31st because I had to chop it off at some point. So in 2021, if we go back to 2021, the third bullet, we had almost 10,000 transactions in that period at the Marlar Street parking lot. Same exact period, 2022, we're down to 8,700. Same period this year. Yeah. So Crystal's reminding me that we did have the resident parking passes implemented in 22. But again, those are things we can't account for as far as transactions. But paid transactions in 2023, we're at 6,800 this year. So we've had kind of a steady decline there. Next slide, please, James. This is something I kind of came up with myself. I'm sure I'm not the first person to ever do this. But what I did was a calculation of the saturation rates for each of our parking lots. And what that is a metric showing the number of transactions per space per day. And again, it's for that period of March 1st through pretty much the end of July, 151 days. And you'll see that the red is this year's number, the blue last year's number, and the green 2021. That's when we were kind of coming back. Everyone was coming out of their hole like Poxitani Phil after COVID. You know, they wanted to come to Destin. So those are the highest numbers. Without exception, every parking feature that we have in our inventory has seen a decline over the last 3 years, with the exception of, again, Gulf Shore Drive. So Gulf Shore Drive has actually increased rather than decreased. So the one way to look at this for Seibert Avenue, so this year we have a 0.5 saturation, which means that if people park there and they don't leave, it'll take 2 days. So 50% of the parking lot would be full at the end of 1 day, on average now. And then, so it would take 2 days to fill up. The Marlar Street parking lot has a saturation rate of 0.31. So it would basically take 3 days. People park, but they don't leave. It'll take 3 days to fill up the parking lot. So that's kind of what I did with saturation. You'll notice that Noriego is pretty steady. I didn't have numbers for this year because it's been closed since mid-March. Next slide, please, sir. Okay, parking enforcement. Okay, so we've had metrics from our Passport portal that we're able to see the number of citations written, paid, or unpaid over fiscal years. So for 21, we had about 1100, 1152, and had a 28% unpaid rate. In 22, pretty much the same unpaid rate, 28, 29%, somewhere right in there. This year, we've had a 40% unpaid rate. And I was unable to get in contact with our Passport representative today, and I want to ask her about this, but I was able to talk to a young man who explained the after citation process. So if code compliance goes out to a facility, say they go to Marlar Street, and they identify a vehicle that did not pay, what they'll do is they'll, in their system, create a citation. Citation is reported to Passport, and we wait. And so after a certain period, hopefully they would, come back to their car, pay for the session. Maybe they don't. But using their license plate number, Passport has the tools to identify the registration address and name of that individual, and they reach out to them. First, with a 10-day letter notice saying that, hey, you were found to be in a Marlar Street parking lot and you didn't pay for your session. So there's a fine of $100. Please pay it. And there's instructions on how to do so. Then we wait. And then 20 days later, a second notice goes out. Now, when I talk to Ms. Andrews tomorrow, hopefully, I'll see what the next process is. That gentleman today couldn't help me with that entirely. And with that, James, I believe that is the end of the presentation, and I would love to answer any questions that you all may have.
Hey, Councilman Bagby. Yeah, I assume you reached out after my conversation with, thank you. I just want you to tell us, I don't need a presentation next time, what the process is afterwards, because 40%, I mean, there's $22,100 sitting on a table somewhere that should be sitting in our table, or at least the lion's share of it. And, you know, I don't know how anybody else feels, but 28, 29%, that's an unacceptable rate. I mean, and now we're talking about being nicer on the letters or nicer on the forms or whatever. I just want somebody to tie all that together, because when I was talking to the staff in the pre-brief, it was, were you talking about code citations, or are you talking about, there's just one parking citation, right? So, you know, that we need a better understanding. The other thing I would like to know is, what's the split? So what's our agreement of, what's the split when they take it to collections all the way and they collect $100? Or my understanding is it goes up another $100 after 3 months, and then it goes up another after 3 months. I just want to know that part, but I don't need the whole slideshow presentation. I just need those questions answered at the next meeting or before the next meeting. Thank you.
Councilman Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I've made it fairly clear about what I think of raising the parking fees from 5 to 15 or 20. But I did note that transactions in the Marler Street parking lot are down by 2,000, which is about a 25%. And that's because people don't want to pay 15. I've parked in downtown Pensacola numerous times, and they seem to have a vendor who does a lot better. You can park by the hour. Most people are only going to be there an hour or two. If I recall correctly, we passed unanimously a motion directing staff to explore possibilities for a better parking vendor who could give us more options. That was about 4 months ago, which is one more thing we tell our staff to make happen that has not happened. Does anybody want to give them a report on what we found out when we tried to explore that?
That was taken to heart, and we came back to council and said we would do that at the end of this season. So that has not taken place yet.
We did have one meeting, and then we didn't want another variable in the data to change in between us trying to figure out if this
Well,
fee
let's
was enough.
hope that we don't forget it. But the point is, we are driving people out of our parking lots with these high fees. I had to hire full-time parking lot attendants in both of my businesses this year. Let me just give you that $20,000 or $30,000, and we'll bring the prices back up and go back to a reasonable parking fee. If our object is to have parking for the people who come here to visit Destin and spend their money in Destin, then we are taking actions in direct opposition to that goal. If all we're trying to do is raise money, then, like someone may have suggested, let's make it $100 a day. And we are failing in our effort to provide parking for the people who come to Destin, and to add insult to injury if they pay attention. They see that we're not charging our residents at all. We're just gouging the folks who come here to visit. So I would hope that sometime when we get that possibility that we can tweak our parking fees, we'll let people park by the hour rather than make them pay 15 for all day. We'll get back to a point where we charge reasonable fees for people to park. I look forward to accomplishing that goal.
Yep, and I'll piggytail on that real quick, and that way I can get my stuff out of the way. I was going to bring up, it seems like November seems to be the drop-off since 2020 on when the parking across the board just drops from the volume. And so if we wanted to, and hopefully we can get an RFP or something, or have something for us to look at as far as other options around that time, so we have the 4 months during the winter to implement, because it seems like every year in March, obviously, it spikes back up. So I'm hopefully this summer, or this winter, when we have those 4 months of downtime, I really am looking for a new system, because it's not good to have bad data and to not be able to know our resident passes, the drop-off timelines. There's a lot of things, but to Councilman Destin's point, we now have data that shows we're not doing an 80-20 on the parking spaces, and potentially that's an eye for a lower price.
Yeah, well, we anticipate trying to build parking garages in another part of the town. We can't even fill the ones we have, and it's a direct result of the prices. If you go out there right now and count the number of cars that are in the parking lot at the harbor, I doubt there's 25 in there. So we need to do something differently so we can get people to actually use these parking lots.
All right, thank you. Councilman Schmidt.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Burgess, for the presentation. I appreciate the data. Any particular reason why we did not include 18 and 19? Do we just not have it?
1 second. James, could you go back up to, oh, I'm sorry, I dropped my
In
slides
regards
here.
to, I'm sorry, well, I guess, yeah,
So
in general.
the fee structure was different back then?
Okay,
Let's go back, keep going all the way, almost to the second slide.
right, $1 for the first hour, 50 cents,
Right.
$5.
So I don't know that it would have been consistent, and we didn't
But
have a lot of,
transactions, though, we would have had the transactions, right?
not for all of the lots. Some of the lots came online later.
Right, but so, okay. I mean, I would have preferred to see all of the data, 18, 19, if we're talking about, if you're gonna show us the Marlowe Street transactions and start with COVID year, I think it would have been a little bit nice to also see that. Like, I hear Mr. Destin, but I don't think Mr. Destin could prove that the reason why they're not up is because we're charging more. I don't think anybody can prove that right now. And I think most people in the hospitality, Mr. Destin will probably agree, I think our numbers are down this year, right? Lodging, hotels, all sorts of stuff. So, and you said yourself, Mr. Burgess, there's the guy that you put on the slide, the confusing guy. There's complicating factors in the metrics, and one particular metric in general is the City of Destin residents with passes. We're not including those people in the saturation rate because we don't know when they're coming in and out, like you mentioned, which I understand that. So. I appreciate you guys putting this together, and I will also say with Mayor Wagner and Mr. Destin as well about the future RFP or whatever we're gonna go do, because we've talked about in the past about the smart, I think Passport does it, y'all said previously, but there's other companies out there as well that we will be able to utilize, and I know we talked about this a year or so ago as well, to utilize that technology to maybe have variable rates based upon seasons, based upon time of the year, based upon the location, as well as we will be able to track the City Destin residents easily and all that stuff. So I definitely look forward to when that goes out, because I think that'll also take weight off of code enforcement, because we won't be issuing parking citations with our code enforcement officers. Sure. They'll be doing other stuff. So thank you for the presentation. I'm not going to let it really impact, I don't think it's a failure right now, in my opinion, that we're charging $15 in these lots. So, but that's just my view right now. But again, thank you for putting this together.
All right, great points. Councilman Guile.
Man, if we would have charged $100 a slot, can you imagine how quickly we'd have that parking garage up right now?
We'd probably have a 70% collection rate. Mr. Bagby was talking about that. So
No, I understand Councilman Destin's point of view there, but one thing I want to mention is something that you already brought up, Councilman Schmidt, is one, we do have a decrease in visitors this year. Two, I've heard that we also have more residents actually utilizing the pass that have actually applied for the pass this year. So there is an influx there. But for the parking lots themselves, from an engineering standpoint, if you can make more money with less usage, you have less wear and tear, you have less costs in maintenance, you have less, to me, this thing's working phenomenally. And if our residents get free parking out of it, and it doesn't hurt them. I think this is working better than anticipated, in my opinion. We're going to more than double our revenue from the previous year, which gets us that much closer to the parking garage that I thought was the goal of raising the fees to begin with. But I do empathize with the restaurant owners that are fighting. I went over to Marina Cafe, and they were chasing people out of their parking lot as well, and I understand that. And that puts that burden on these restaurant owners. But then again, there's multi-services happening from these restaurants as well. They have rental system units down there. They're utilizing their area. And I believe Luther's utilizes, so people are finding their way in there, I think, through other facets rather than just not paying the $20. But I do empathize with the restaurant owners that are fighting this.
All right, Councilman King.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I was just going to echo the same kind of thing. I don't think there's any way to I don't think there's any way to, there's not any way to tell how many people are using it, but what I've seen in my business is that we're getting back to 2019 numbers. So I would say if there was any way to go back and tell how many people were parking in those lots, I would say it's probably reflective of what we did in 2019. I just wanted to say I echo those two things. Thanks.
Okay, Councilwoman Aber.
Thank you, Mayor. To echo what Mr. King just said, I agree. On the TDC, we look at everything back on the 2019. We compare now to 2019. So I really feel like we missed the boat on getting the real judgment of where we're at with the parking versus what's available for 2019. So I just wanted to make sure that that was also my concern, that we probably didn't get the right numbers.
I still liked your presentation, Michael Burgess.
Well, I actually have the Marlar numbers right here if you'd like to see it. For that's fiscal 18, number of sessions was 5343. And for fiscal 19, 4740.
4740. Okay. All right, thank you so much. All right, seeing no other discussions on the board, there's no motion to be had there, so Ray, if you can just cancel me out, and we'll move on. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4B is a presentation update on the undergrounding effort for the city of Destin, and Ms. Crystal Strickland put together this agenda item for you. We have in the audience to answer questions and make the presentation. We have Mr. Chef Wright, who's our utility attorney. We also have Mr. Mark Porter of UCOF, who is heading up this project for us. So Mark, I think it's you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here again tonight. It's always nice to get up here in this area. Wanted to provide you with a real brief undergrounding update as to where we are. A little history on the original cost estimate that we put together about 2 years ago. We had planned to underground the 3-mile aerial section along US 98 from the bridge to Airport Road. That we defined that as phase 1. During the design stages with FPL, we discussed picking up a significant amount of laterals to incorporate in that. And basically, what we're talking about with laterals is, let's say in some of those areas off of that east-west segment, you might want to extend 4 or 5, just, it averages through the areas, but you might have 4 or 5 poles north and south. It makes sense rather than have a termination pole, just to go ahead and pick those up during this phase. It eliminates them in the future phase as well. So from a cost efficiency, it's definitely the right route to go.
And that would be for the northern connections, as if we were to go north?
Correct. Eventually, as you go north and south, you'd have to pick them up anyway. There's some sections, they're just so small, especially in the south and those southern sections, you're right up on the harbor anyway, so it made sense to pick them up now. So when we went through the design phase, we went ahead and incorporated that. It did add approximately 2.6 line miles of aerial facilities to be undergrounded in addition to that original 3-mile. So the original cost for that 3-mile segment was estimated at $12.8 million. We are now at $14.7 million, but it includes the total of that 5.69 miles, and it's less than what we would have expected for that type of an increase, especially with the inflationary pressures that we've seen over the last couple of years. It seems to be I feel it's a very favorable outcome for the city that includes that. Although this number's not final, we feel it's closer now that we have received the FPL design. So basically, in short, we scaled the FPL drawings in detail. So now we have exact quantities that we didn't have about a year or two ago. What we did from that is we took a lot of recent cost estimates or bids that we've received recently, even one over in the neighboring Gulf Breeze project, use those numbers with those quantities to kind of really get a better number. Although we don't have the actual bids that have come in yet for this, we'll talk a minute about putting it out for procurement. It gives us a really better feel as to where we're going to be sitting on the undergrounding portion for the contractor portion. We have what we reference as carriers. There's 3 of them. So for this project, you have Cox Communication, CenturyLink, and Unity Fiber. We've received estimates from 2 of those carriers. We still have one that we're waiting for. They're getting close to that. So what we did is we used those 2 carriers that we've got that information and kind of forecasted the 3rd one in line with what we saw for those 2 others in that cost. For the streetlights, we're still working with FPL. We want to provide and present some options for the streetlight. There's obviously different considerations for the council to look at and make. We did assume some cost assumption for the streetlight board. We have been in several conversations with streetlight folks. We know that you're going to have conduits on both sides of the road to feed those future light poles and the offsets that we're projecting from the photometrics, so we've determined those costs as well. The landscaping costs can be estimated once we get a better idea of what the city's vision is. We've heard the conversation about some earlier conversations, I think, were with landscaping, with trees and shrubberies and things like that. There's also been discussion about maybe consideration to using wraps around the equipment. So when we get a better idea of what that vision is for the council, then we can take that in and kind of hone in on those costs as well. With that being said, let me share we've put together in your package or one of the current slides, I'm not sure if we have it, but in short, we tied down some dates with the FPL BCE that we'll be presenting. We're estimating right now that timeline or projection to be October. For the underground contractor procurement, we're looking to have that complete as well in October. The franchise agreement, of course, would be part of that October timeframe. And then the carrier agreement, same thing between October and November. Then the contractor NTP of March of next year. We've been talking with FPL, and they did discuss that some of those materials will have to kind of be staggered out. So what we showed in the packet was 3 rollouts of that. And what we did was we kind of based the schedule still in that 18-month window of construction, but kind of staggered it out. So that's why you see first stage, second stage, and third stage with that. That initial release of materials is looking for April of next year. So that's why we're showing the contractor NTP of March. We don't want to have anyone with the city responsible for kind of collecting those materials, making sure they're staged correctly, inventory. It can be very convoluted. So we're just trying to make sure that they're here even on a limited NTP, just to make sure that it's secure, it's safe, and that everything that's coming in is accounted for. So with that, unless you have any questions, I just kind of wanted to give you a quick update on that and see if there's anything to add. I think Crystal might have some things to add as well.
Do we have a site located for the materials?
We've been talking with city staff on that. I think that there's some opportunities. What we would recommend is that if the city has some areas, because we know now that the materials are going to kind of come in at a staged event, you wouldn't need to, take receipt of all that material at one time. If we have in the RFPs for the contractors for them to provide those, they're usually going to look for off-site or workout. It typically could cost the city more. So if you've got some areas where they could utilize that, we could work with them. Even if they're smaller satellite locations, they could always get something off the island, bring it in for the week, and then carry things back out. So it's definitely something to consider.
Thank you so much. All right. Do you guys, the guys who are on, want to talk to him first?
Yeah,
All right.
I do.
All right, up first is going to be Councilman Schmidt.
All right, thank you for being here tonight. I heard you were coming, so I had to, get
I know I had
dressed
to
up
throw a
little
jacket
bit,
on. I'm
too.
sorry, too. I got a
always-
little bit of a hoarse.
No, you're good. So I just want to follow up with you on a few things. First of all, I think it is amazing that we have a timeline that we could potentially see these things switched on. That 2025 timeframe that you mentioned, that's amazing. But inside the packet that Crystal gave us, it talks about choosing to hire FPL or choosing to hire our own person. You talked about landscaping things and all these things that you said from the council. So you need that tonight? Are these decisions you're wanting to make? A staff, chef, whoever's going to bring these questions back later? Or what do you need?
I think it's a rollout, right? The
Okay.
BC you're going to be getting with the franchise agreement here. I think we've got that scheduled to come into the next council meeting. I think
September
Yes,
21st.
if I may. So tonight's agenda, this presentation is just to give you an update to kind of set the stage for what you're going to see at the next few council meetings.
Right.
So yeah, all those decisions will be made at the
So would it
next-
be possible before the Friday night, the agenda or something, if we have a little bit more time to know so I could prepare some ideas, talk to people to understand that at that meeting, we need to come with some massive ideas about, the landscaping stuff. Is that a potential timeline that we can get from somebody?
I can.
Or
I
so our
think
Parks Department and all these different committees, that need to be having an insight as well.
I agreed sooner than later would be good. I think we've got time for the landscaping. We wanted to try to get a little bit more idea because the way that the franchise agreement's written, there's a 10% currently allocated towards landscaping. What we thought is we've basically got a really good idea. Now we have 130 easements per, for FPL per se. So now that we're starting to get the numbers, we're waiting to see if the cures have any adjustments. So we can definitely present some options. I know that city staff has been looking at some wrapping options. Landscape is really what would be maybe, the desire of the council members. We can throw together a couple of ideas, but.
No, that's fine. I just like to kind of be prepared and kind of, try to know. So,
So maybe
so we have an idea. So I guess I'll get with Crystal and Jeff and people. Okay.
Yeah, and maybe during the next time, I think I might be coming at the next one, the one after, but I can bring some landscape options and assign cost to them. They're just rough costs, but they'll give you a really good idea. So at least
Appreciate
if
it.
we went with that option, we're looking at about this much.
All right.
If you don't mind, on the landscaping, so when we wrote our franchise agreement and we restricted the 2% towards undergrounding, at that time, we had somebody who strongly requested that we commit 10% of it, 90% for the undergrounding, 10% towards the landscaping. So we're going to be coming to you. So my estimate right now is that would equate to over $3 million, and I'm not sure that we actually have $3 million worth of landscaping, even when you include in the streetlights, some of the hardscaping that we have. So we may be coming to council to discuss that further. There were also some strong desires at that time on the types of vegetation. That's a hot word tonight that we would be putting in. But anyway, there will be plenty of time for that. It's not in the current RFP as it's written, but we're discussing about how to put it in. Most cities who do undergrounding, they do not have this restriction, and they tend to not have the contractor who does the boring. It tends not to be the contractor who does the landscaping. As a matter of fact, most of the cities have the property owners go back and do the landscaping after the fact, once the city addresses, changing out sidewalk plates and so forth. But don't worry, we'll give you a lot of a lot of time to think through all of these things before they come back to you.
Right, Councilwoman Aber, or unless you have.
No, I was just going to say thank you for saying that, and for a lot of the landscaping projects that we're doing underground, that they do have smaller budgets for that, but we're definitely happy to come back and provide some of those details. I wanted to say too, to add to that, the procurement package that we put out for the contractor, none of those decisions should hold that up, because usually what we do is we give that as an optional bid item, so that the city can come back and say, you know what, we would rather do that with maybe an in-house landscaper that they might be able to use. So you at least can get some bids to see if those undergrounding contractors were to do that work, what that might entail on those costs, but also give you the option to pull it out and give it to someone that might be able to do it locally for a better price.
All right, thank you for that. All right, Councilwoman Aber.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for coming tonight. This is exciting to see the timeline. I agree with Mr. Schmidt, seeing it moved up, and having some dates and seeing it fall into place. There was a couple things you mentioned about the wraps. I guess we did sort of like a test thing of 5 wraps throughout the city. I do think that would be awesome if we could get that done, because carrying that theme of a lot of the neighborhoods and the areas, especially down 98, it just looks so, it's unique and it's neat. And, being a small town, it's sort of like our own little, thing that we've got going on with the different types of wrap we've currently chosen. And then the other thing, you mentioned the accounts of, Verizon and Comcast. Is there any reason why AT&T wasn't in that? I mean, is there something specific that you are looking for that they wouldn't be part of these initial setups?
Well, so for this first particular phase, AT&T just has a crossing going across 98. They don't have anything running down the line that we're undergrounding. So fortunately, they're not part of that. They are in that corridor, so they're probably servicing, but not along US 98. So that's kind of a huge advantage. So.
Awesome. All right, Councilman Destin.
My question may be related, Teresa, is what progress are we making on addressing the other folks that are hanging on the poles out there? At one time, Chef said we were going to do an ordinance that requires them to go underground. Are we doing anything along those lines? Because if we don't get those folks off the poles, then what have we accomplished?
So as part of this project, we're involved with, like I said, Cox Communications, CenturyLink, and Unity Fiber. All three of them, we're in negotiations with them now to go ahead and they'll be fully underground. The goal would be that they're actually installed underground and wrecked out before FPL's ready to come in. We don't want them still on the poles when FPL's ready to wreck out those facilities. That's kind of an important goal of ours up front. So we're in conversations with all of them now. And part of that estimate that we just shared with you right now is with some of them already providing us with their estimates. They're not 100% final, but they're fairly close. They're much better than we were a few years ago. So we're trying to finalize that. With that, we're working with Chef Wright to come up with languages or contracts within each one of them individually to kind of outline what is the scope and tell of what their role is going to be for the project, so we can ensure that the city gets that work accomplished and within the timeline that fits within the timeline of what we're doing for our undergrounding project. And we're assuming that all of it, if not a large part of it, will be done through the city's undergrounding contractor, so that you'll control that scope, you'll control the cost, and you control the time frame rather than the individual utility carriers coming out and doing it individually. Plus, with that, the sensitivity of that corridor, we don't want to risk multiple contractors coming in and out at the same time. So usually on all of our projects, the contractor that's doing the undergrounding, they'll bore in all of that collectively, and it's such more efficient, cost efficient, but just getting in and out of those areas so that you're not coming back and trying to coordinate with so many different entities. So we're getting close. My project manager's here with me tonight, but we just had a meeting with Cox Communication last Friday that was very positive. Just to share, since you brought it up, they expressed that they're 100% committed to the project. They're looking forward to working with the city, and they're excited to be part of it, and they like the idea of the undergrounding project. So we don't see any of the carriers now that we feel aren't excited to be part of the project and working with us pretty well at this point. But
did I misunderstand the need for an ordinance of some sort?
I'm going to say thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Destin. I think you need an ordinance. The ordinance is drafted. I've been in regular communication with Ms. Kopp regarding the ordinance. We plan to bring it to you when we bring the actual underground facilities conversion agreement for this first phase to you. That was just kind of a decision made for logistical purposes. If it appears, I drop the if, it does appear that we are going to be able to get to written agreements, which I've been bugging everybody about for months, written agreements with each of the other telecom and cable type utility providers, Unity Fiber, CenturyLink, and Cox. It appears we're going to be able to get there. If we get there with agreements that are satisfactory to us, the city, then you don't need an ordinance at this time to make them do it, because you'll have a written contract that they will have agreed to do it. So, but for future phases, I think you should have an ordinance, and it's written and it's ready to come before you. It's just a question of the logistics of timing right now.
Which is exactly what I'm also asking the timing should be, and I have great faith that they're going to work with us too, but it's always good to have Plan B.
Well, and my Plan A has been to Plan A1 and A2 have been have the ordinance, but more importantly, frankly, have a written contract that you can enforce if something goes a little crooked down the line.
Well, we're going to cover all possibilities, right?
Yes,
Tim, you got
sir.
something?
Okay, thanks.
All right, Councilman Bagby.
Bye. I want Crystal. Because I only talk about money. You know, landscaping, no offense, that's 3 years down the road. It'll change 4 times between now and then, because depending on the time of season, you know, there's a planting season. You're not going to go out there and plant it this week. So if they get finished this time, we'll be waiting another 4 months after that. So I'm not worried about landscaping. I am worried about money. So 2 meetings ago, we talked in the 5-year plan that we had $31 million for undergrounding. seriously, I don't have any questions for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We talked about, we had $31 million in the 5-year plan for undergrounding, and we couldn't figure out, is that just phase 1? Is that phase 2? Is that phase 1, 2, and 3? So now I understand that the 5-year plan is down to $16 million for the undergrounding, okay? And that is just for phase 1. So now we're all kind of on the same sheet of music where we know how much or we know about how much, depending on how fancy we want to get with light posts and landscaping, but it's about 16 million for phase 1. It's probably going to be 2 or 3 years before we get through phase 1. And Crystal, if you look, when you read the read ahead, you see that really all they're asking for is some feedback, not a decision, not a motion, but some feedback on the 3 debt scenarios of, how much we want to spend. Do we want to do 20-year bonds for $22 million. Now, remember, and somehow we lost about $1 million in between when I talked to Crystal at 1:30 and Lance at 1:30, and when we got in here, because we had $2 million sitting in one account, and we had 1.3 that would be sitting in the other account at the end of next month. So we had 3.3, and now we're down to 2.3 in the bank, which I'm not sure how that happened. But basically, we have to decide how we want to pay for all this. That is and we need to figure out, do we want to roll everything in? And we may not need $30 million, because obviously, if we only need 16 million for phase 1, and then the 9 million, we already have some money that that is available cash or cash equivalent for the 9 million, part of the 9 million, and then part of the connector, crosstown connector we only need about 4 million to complete that. And that really is, a couple of those numbers are, I don't want to say changeable, but they're not hard right now. And so probably by the time we actually do make a decision, we will have hard numbers. And when do we think we will have hard numbers in order to give you a decision, Crystal?
Okay, so the reason I brought this up tonight is I was just trying to make the budgeting process go a little smoother. Obviously, when we do a debt issuance, all the details are brought before council multiple times with all of the full details, and we have the full cost estimates for the projects. So the missing pieces right now for undergrounding, as we mentioned, there's one carrier that hasn't given us their binding cost estimate yet. We're still waiting on the final details, so FPL streetlights, plus or minus $200,000 from the $1 million that I put into our estimate. Landscaping, and we're also trying to attain additional credits. There's a new tariff coming out that the PSC is confirmed. I think that's coming out the end of the month, end of August, right, Chef?
Yes, there's a new tariff going into effect on August 31st. Additionally, we're working on some details of exactly how the credits need to be calculated to come to a final number for the cost of the project if we, the city, do all the work, which I would recommend, based on all my experience, we should do, as Mark said earlier. So there's more details. You asked the question when. I'm going to knock wood. We're hoping to be here in advance with information to you in advance of the September 21 meeting. That's the date we're shooting for.
So yeah, so then we'll have the binding cost estimates with FPL, and then we need to do the RFP for construction. We would like to send the RFP out on the street and be collecting those in October and November to bring presentations back to you. So it's really, we're not going to have final numbers till probably January, February timeframe. But I'm just trying to set the stage. Each time we sign an agreement, we're one step closer to a final number. The first agreement that we need to sign is the binding cost estimate and conversion agreement with FPL, and that'll be coming next month. So with these 3 debt scenarios, they're just food for thought. Right now, what I have budgeted and I have done all the cash flows out to 2050 to make sure that the cash flow parts work. We have the 9 million that we need to reimburse the Harbor CRA for this purchase of the One Harbor Boulevard. I have enough cash on hand that I think 13 million would be adequate to complete this phase 1. And like you said, that number could go a little up or a little bit down, but all of the ups and downs look like they could kind of even out. And I'm still feel pretty confident with the 13 million I could get this first phase done. So that's the first estimate you have. The aggregate is $22 million. Cost of issuance would be close to $350,000. With a bond issuance, we're looking at a rate of about 4.1%. So we have our total debt service would be 32 million, and that would be covered by the Harbor CRA would pay all of the Harbor CRA. And right now for the undergrounding, I have the 2 CRAs also pitching in towards that debt service as their cash flows allow, and the electric finance, the electric franchise fee paying the remainder. There's still, even with that cash flow out, in the electric franchise fee, what we're forecasting, there's still another $17 million that we could use as securitization. I'm just putting out, if we spent another $4 million or so, then we could have the contractors continue on north all the way up to Azalea. So we've been talking about how much further could we get for maybe another $4 million. And that would cost the city about $5.8 million when you count in all of the interest cost. And that 17 million remainder from the electric franchise fee would go to pay all of that additional. We also, I added in, just because we have the Crosstown Connector that we've been trying to complete for so many years. I just put that in as an idea, just let me know if you like this idea or not, or maybe you want something in between. But the money to complete the Crosstown Connector, the general fund would have to support gas tax number 2, but in the future years, after about the 3rd year, gas tax number 2 should have no problems paying the debt service on that loan if we were to borrow $4 million to complete the Crosstown Connector. And gas tax 2, by the way, it's a really hard chunk of money to spend because there are a lot of restrictions from the state, but this is exactly what the purpose is. It's for comprehensive plan related items that address traffic issues. So those are the 3 scenarios you have in there. If we go from the 22 million up to 30 million, to borrow 30 million instead, the cost of issuance increases by about $40,000. So the incremental cost up front is not that much higher, and your all-in true interest cost goes down a little bit because we're issuing more money and we get more attention. We'll get more attention from the bond markets. The very last, 3rd scenario, just so that you can see the difference, I put in a bank loan. The banks tend to be lending a little bit shorter right now, and their rates are definitely higher, about the 5.2% range. So those are the 3 debt scenarios that you have in here. I have vetted to make sure all of our cash flows going out to 2050, these dedicated amounts can handle them. So it's just at council's discretion. I know sometimes it's a difficult choice to put in a lot of debt, but I kept this shorter on the 20-year side, and because that'll set us kind of free from this burden of debt a little bit earlier.
Okay, so a couple of things that Crystal didn't mention. Number one, if we don't start till next spring, we continue to collect franchise fee money, gas tax money, so that lowers the amount that we might have to borrow. Number two, we currently pay just a little over $500,000 a year in interest on our debt. Not principal, interest. And if we borrow this, say the 20 million, maybe a little bit more than 20 million, 22, that's going to increase the debt interest, at least initially, about $700,000 a year. So we're going to be paying $1.2 million of all the monies we collect just in interest So that you kind of need to wrap your head, because there's a lot of stuff we could do in this town with $1.2 million if we had it on hand. I'll just speak for me, I want to keep the top end number as low as possible, probably not over 25 million. You could still wrap all three projects up in there. There is some utility, and I understand that. But 30 million's not, I won't vote for 30 million, but I'm only one vote, so it doesn't really matter. But we have, this is the biggest problem or issue we're going to face on anything in this town probably in the next 10 years, is how we do that. Probably the second one being what we do with that parcel and that whole area, but we've got an agenda item on that later. So I just want to, make sure everybody was kind of focused on, because we're talking about a lot of money for a city this size, and how we're going to pay for it, when we're going to pay for it, how much we're going to borrow. I'm not about going to any further north. I mean, we already took a 3-mile project into a 5.6-mile project, just going north and south. Okay, so we moved 2 phases that were not named 2 and 3 in front of 2 and 3. And I get that there is a cost benefit to that. We're already there. We've already got the machinery there. We're already doing that. But the folks in the other part of town that are paying into that franchise fee, they were promised something and they expect to get it also. So I'm not, if we're going to do anything, you look at phase 2 before you go another half mile or mile north of phase 1. So that's just my thoughts. Thank you.
All right, Councilman Destin, then Schmidt.
I tend to agree with Councilman Bagby. We need to look at the financing very closely, what we're going to spend. Banks sometimes, because these public projects give them special taxing benefits, can get down close to the bond. When you do a bond, there's always a great deal of money that costs to do the bond for all the people that take care of it. We do need to keep it as low as possible. Another factor is if we roll the crosstown connector into it, the average lifespan of a road, or at least that I always understood in the last 30 years, is 10 to 15 years before you have to redo it, resurface it. It's never a good idea to borrow money that won't be paid off for 20 years to do a project that won't last 10 to 15. So we need to think about perhaps doing that in another manner. We'll look at it, but we actually need to have a meeting that's going to have dedicated an hour or more to how we're going to figure this out. And tonight's not the night. I know we're rolling forward, but we need to look very closely at our financing, and we need to keep the number as low as we can.
All right, thank you so much. Councilman Schmidt.
I appreciate it. Mr. Bagby, you mentioned $1.2 million in the interest if we, with some of these proposed changes, but I know you said that the city residents could do a lot with that per year, but then you talked about going to 25 million as a total. So they're still, you're in favor of not 1.25 per year, but maybe 900,000. We got to do it, right? You're just trying to highlight the fact that it's costing us. Right, so I like Mr. Destin, Mr. Bagby. There's some things you guys both say. I'm not sure what that number is, Crystal, if it's 24, 25, 26 to get the different bond rating number or bond, percentage to get there. I'd like to be around that level because although we can use that gas tax, like Mr. Destin said, the length of time is not beneficial for the life of the road, but I also don't want to give up on pursuing the funding options for that crosstown connector. There should be things that we can hopefully continue to seek out, state, whoever, to hopefully continue to fight to get some money to go that route. And I feel like if we just allocate $4 million to finish crosstown connector and say we're going to use the gas tax to repay it, it's just kind of, all right, now we can rest. We got the $4 million for the crosstown connector, we're done. Not saying that's what will actually happen, but I would rather, if we need it, we'll get it later. But if we can still get the better bond rating at the $24, $25 million number, I think that's more comfortable. And if there's a benefit with the consultants and everybody else that says, hey, going north, a third of a mile, quarter mile, whatever, will ultimately, it's not like we're trying to skip in phase 2, but if that's going to allow for connections or something for some reason, I imagine there's a reason we're going to potentially go north before we go to phase 2, but then whenever that comes time, we can talk about it.
Yeah, I'll just mention the initial phase 2 basically has Henderson Beach on the south side and a bunch of unincorporated Destin on the north side. So
Gotcha.
that's why I
Right.
didn't say
And we can talk
just
about-
immediately hop over there. But anyway.
Yeah, sounds good.
But yes.
That's my thoughts on the funding packages you presented. Thank you.
All right, I see no further discussions. Yep, so
No, just information.
Lance, back to you.
Thank you, sir. Item 4C, the city manager annual evaluation report was summarized by Ms. Jamie Dittmer for your review, and she is here to answer any questions.
Councilman Bagby.
So this is where we're supposed to figure out if we're going to do a raise, right? Is
Yes.
in August?
Yes.
Okay. And the COLA, my understanding of the COLA that's going to be applied this year after all the numbers is going to be 3%. It's actually 2.97, but it will probably round it up to 3%. And the only thing we really haven't decided is what we're going to do for merit.
That's correct.
Okay, so we've talked about 4, we've talked about less than 4, but we really haven't, until we get into the budget next month, we haven't really picked that number. So my motion would be, and just so everybody knows, because y'all probably didn't read this online, but 70% of the evaluations submitted for the city manager of the items in each of the evaluations, 70% were exceeds expectations, and then the remaining, 72, I think, in one case, and 70 in the other. There's 2 sections. So I would say whatever number we pick for merit, I would say 70% of that number would be, plus the 3% COLA, would be whatever raise he should get for the year. And so I'll make the motion that pending identification of our merit number, and I don't want to decide it tonight because we really need to go through the budget and have the budget in front of us to see how it makes sense. I'll make that motion.
All right, got a motion on the table. A second?
Second.
Further discussions? Councilwoman Hebert.
I've had private discussions offline with the city manager, and at this time, I cannot support a merit increase, but I will support the COLA update.
All right, thank you. Councilman Destin.
Do we have to vote to put the COLA in for the city manager, or is that automatic?
I think he would get it automatically, but I think to Councilmember Hebert's point, she just wants to explain that she supports the COLA.
Okay, and my other question would be, I'm a little bit hesitant to vote on a raise that I really don't know what it is yet. Okay. So that's premature in my opinion.
All right, Councilman Schmidt, want to poll?
No, I'll withdraw my motion until the first meeting in September.
All right, either way.
When we know what that number is, that's a valid point.
Councilman Schmidt, you still want to weigh in?
Sure. I'll just add that Mr. Bagby mentioned the things that were presented or provided, and part of the resolution that the council passed in previous times does not specify any requirements to do any type of forms or submit forms or anything like that. I think it left it to the discretion of council members to do those types of things. So I've met with Lance in the past and have expressed my dissatisfaction with certain aspects of the job. And so I know you just pulled it, but I wanted to add that since you brought it up first. And so I could support doing a COLA thing with the budget as well, but since we're going to reevaluate in September, that's fine.
All right, good deal. With no motion on the table, we will press on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4D is a presentation about a potential city marina by Captain Jim Green. Captain Jim.
Good evening. Jim's fine. Titles imply responsibility. So I'm the chairman of the Harbor CRA Committee, Advisory Committee. I'm the chairman of the Harbor Capacity Steering Committee. I'm a member of the Harbor and Waterways Board, and I'm the president of our Charter Boat Association here in Destin. I put this together. This kind of started coming to me as the council started discussing One Harbor Boulevard, some of the needs of this city and some of the things that we already have in the Harbor District, and then started reflecting back on the strategic plan and some of the things we have there. If you remember, I came to you and was talking about buying it for a public purpose, and in this presentation, I've gotten about six of them outlined, and probably another couple there that I've thought of offhand. But the city marina in Destin, in the Destin Harbor, it's one of the most sought-after places to keep a vessel, whether commercially or privately owned. The harbor has created a synergy over the last few years, and that's been a commitment of private businesses as well as planning by the city. This proposed marina has 41 slips, 40 rentable and 1 pump-out slip. There's 10 30-foot slips, 20 50-foot slips, and 10 65-foot slips. The need for more dockage for vessels of all different modes, private and commercial, is real in the Destin Harbor. Putting together some pretty conservative numbers, being $1,250 for the 30-foot slips, $1,500 for the 50, and $1,750 for the 65-foot slips. If you used all the slips and you did year-round leasing of the slips and no transit slips, you're looking at about $750,000 annually that the marina would bring in. There are some ends of the docks there that you can see that could be used for transit. In the summertime, those transit slips and what you charge by the foot is significantly higher than a long-term lease. It could possibly bring in more than that. There's 108 foot in the center pier, and there's 73 foot on the farthest away from the shoreline pier that could also be used for transit slips as well. Another thing is that under code, this property would only be allowed 33 slips. We have in the Harbor Waterways Board approved marinas that exceed what has been in the code if it has a good benefit for the public, or if it meets a certain circumstance and the owner of the property that's developing it wants to come to us and try and produce more slippage. So this does exceed that, but it's within the boundary everywhere else, and that would be a trip to the Harbor and Waterways Board, which I would think this would go there anyway. The next public purpose would be improved parking. I was watching some of what was presented here tonight, and this is 150 parking spots. That's a 9 by 18. That's a standard parking spot. That would increase the public parking in the Harbor District by about 50%. Going off some of the numbers that Michael brought up there, I would think that this would be more sought after parking. You would be able to park and get on the boardwalk without crossing a single road, and you're going to be able to go underneath the bridge to connect to the Harbor Festive Marketplace. Just using the Seibert lot, and I did some kind of quick math, you're looking at about $100,000 a year revenue in parking, and that was me doing it on 100 parking spots. That's 150 on the drawing. So needless to say, a significant amount of income would come in from that. Moving into that would be the phase 2 of the boardwalk going under the bridge. I was down there today kind of looking around on the sidewalk by the bridge there, and this would be a great place to have it come under there. There's a place where you could do it over land, which would possibly significantly cut down the cost of the boardwalk going under the bridge, compared to doing it out over the water. It also, with the driveway in the conceptual drawing here, with the driveway going down there, it would allow for law enforcement to have very good access to under the bridge, to any problems that would happen that may occur under there, or people congregating. Connectivity. So if you look on the upland part of the drawing, there's the blue line that runs along the north side of the property line, and the yellow line connecting it to the street. That can be an ADA approved sidewalk. Looking at the grade today, it's about 15, 20 foot from where the roadway is to where the boardwalk would be. So that grade on the property is actually very favorable to use that grade. It would take very little change in what's there. And it would allow access from the Zerby lots, the Cyber lot and the Zerby lots, and the community center for people to be able to access the boardwalk and still cross into the Harbor Festive Marketplace without having to cross 98. Another thing is the marine waste pump out facility. So right now, the only one I know of is at Harbor Walk. We've discussed with Ms. Trammell before in our Harbor CRA that a lot of issues the Destin Water Users has had because it is such a solid waste. I've done some more research on it. There's a lot more products available in this industry. There's products that grind it, add more water to it, and lift it to a sewer line. So, you know, there's a lot more to it than just having a pump out in a tank and then having a truck come down there and be able to pump it out. So we have a lot more options with that. And being as on the harbor harbor capacity study, I think y'all remember we talked about water, the need to have clean waterways, and how we only have one facility in the Destin Harbor at this time. Another one was that you heard a lot whenever we were discussing when y'all were discussing all this, was having a place for the public to be able to come watch a sunset and enjoy the vista, rather than have another development right by the bridge. In the south side of the upland, you'll see that magenta or burgundy colored area. Right now, that's where I was today. There's actually a big concrete wall that's existing, and it's up at street level. And it could be expanded, but that right there is existing as it is. And it could be expanded, but it's a very, very big area if you walk it. And you could have a couple 3 foot concrete wall in between you and the road. I walked along the roadway today. It wasn't heavy traffic, but I didn't feel uncomfortable doing it, but having a partition there might improve that. But it would give the ability for someone to park or to walk up to it using a sidewalk from the intersection and be able to enjoy it. It was really nice. You could see far past Crab Island. You could see further north in the bay than you would think right there. And also, because of the grade of where the bridge is and you're right at the foot of it, you can see the entire path. So by having all this added to this property and developing it in some manner of this way, we check a lot of boxes. You know, another thing that could happen is that right now Lamar has an advertising sign on that property. Be a really good place to leave it in place and make it the Welcome to Destin sign, or upgrade it to a digital sign and have just city stuff on there, not advertising. We had a CRA meeting that turned into a workshop, as Ms. Kim will tell you, because we didn't have a quorum that was able to make it there for various reasons. Ms. Sandy was there. She was on board with it. Of course, I'm on board with it. She spoke about later development of having like an elevated area, more elevated area for people above the parking lot, but maybe that being a future development. But this is important because we have, as you know, we've been talking about finances here for a while, and this would be a property that would allow for the city to take in some income, especially with the CRA having 20 years left in it, and we're basically using CRA funds to pull this in to buy this piece of property. You know, we have already more things in the CRA that need to get done as it is, and I'm sure over the next 20 years, things that we don't foresee. So it would be, I think we have a lot of green space in the Harbor District. We got Clement Taylor Park where folks can enter the water by foot. We got Leonard Destin Park where you have a nice view too. and we have the gateway to the harbor with the Royal Melvin Heritage Park. And I think that by purchasing this property, it would be extremely disappointing if we didn't utilize this, not just for a public purpose, but to also allow us to be able to replenish the harbor CRA funds and be able to have the ability, or at least mitigate the funds that the harbor CRA is going to be dedicating to the purchase of the property. So, not much of a presentation, I know, and that is to scale. It took me a long time to draw that, but if you have any questions on it, I'd be happy to answer it, and I really appreciate the council and Mr. Mayor, y'all let me have a microphone to bring this up.
I would hold on up there because I got several. We got a Christmas train going on.
Let's do it.
All right. So first up is going to be Councilman Schmidt.
Jim, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I've heard amazing stories about your experience as a fishing captain. You might want to take a side gig up in drafting. This is pretty amazing. Man.
I will disclose I took 4 years of drafting in high school.
Okay.
So I did have a little bit of background.
Go on Fiverr.com and offer your services. Just don't sell
This
them
was
your
done
license.
on this was done on Adobe Illustrator, but yeah.
Got it. Well, I mean, first of all, I think you just said Harbor CRA didn't have a quorum, so I think what you meant by saying that is this is not voted on or approved or sent by the Harbor CRA.
It is
that
not.
kind of what the purpose of? Okay. Well, thank you, first of all, for starting this. I mean, we're potentially a month and a half away, hopefully, maybe longer. Mr. Bagby said it previously. We don't have to close in October, but we don't even own it yet. But I think this has garnered some of the most conversation that we've had around here in a long time about this piece of property. So I commend you and whoever else that's starting this. And I appreciate it, but I think we have a long way to go. And this is just a starting point. So I don't think there's a problem with it, but I think there's a whole, in my mind, I see different committees putting together their similar ideas, I do know we've talked about a city marina. One question I'll have for you right now, if you don't mind, and I think you could answer it hopefully, is I've heard and seen, and even the picture, the depth of that area. Mm-hmm. The size boats that you're talking about, how can you put those there? What will have to be done to put the boats you're wanting to put there in this presentation?
Yeah, so and of course it's highlighted really well there. In the lightest part in between the second and third dock, it would have to be dredged.
Right.
And there's actually a lot, if you look at that piece of property, it's very topographical as it goes. When you look at the grade, it's not that extreme, but it's very topographical. And there will be need to backfill some of that stuff, or it could be used maybe to re-nourish the point where you have constantly sounded the alarm on that erosion. So
that's right.
This may be a place for that. By being down there today, I actually looked at it, and whenever we armored the point, we actually created when we armored the point and we did the point project, we changed the dynamics down there, and it's actually deeper against the seawall now than it is even in this picture. I think this picture was from 2022, but you could tell I was down there when tide was flooding, when it was coming in, and there's actually a push of water that comes around that pocket, and it's actually deeper than that, and there's not quite as much shoal. This is, that picture might be a little too highlighted, but I don't think it would take as much as you would think for material removal, but
sure,
it definitely would need to get to 10 foot, and I would say at the shallowest, it's probably close to 6.
Right. Okay. And I'll say, and my thoughts right now tonight they could easily change. Right. I mean, this is going to be a discussions that we're going to be having many of probably here in the future. I like the idea of docks. I like the idea of boats down there. I don't like an idea of putting a parking lot that takes the entire property. I don't like the idea of a city-run marina versus private-run marina right now. Could there be a way to do it? Maybe, but usually the marketplace does better at running those types of things. And I know the numbers are there, the revenue, sure, but I also don't see when we talk about the public benefit, there's probably a lot of public that will argue with us, you, whoever, to say that that's going to be the best public benefit, because that's really going to benefit primarily, in my opinion, the 30, 40 boats. And then if there's an event going on, then the public will come and participate. But, you know, again, I think it's a great discussion. You know, if we're throwing out ideas, then I'll try to draft up the next one is you know, the view. I mean, the space, the green space. Put the Destin Fishing Museum where you got that blue line on the north side up there where you can walk through. People can walk through the fishing museum on the bay, you know. Have a stage at the bottom for the local music groups, high school groups, whoever, to be able to perform on with the background. Still have the docks out there. Not opposed to that. But I think, you know, the vision of what else is going to be there. And talk about parking, we have the Zerby lot. I mean, I got the numbers, council got numbers today on the parking garage. That was in 2018, 2019. There was 600 and something proposed spots. And I asked Mr. Burgess, but he wasn't here at this time. So I think that was only on one of those Zerby lots. And now we have 3. I think the map was like for 1. So, I mean, there's parking's not going to be a need in this area because 300 yards away, we got potential for 1,000 parking spots. You know what I'm saying?
I would say in theory that is probably true.
Right.
But when I got on the Harbor CRA in 2011, 2012, the first thing we did was give back about $750,000 because we were about to build a double-decker parking garage at Marler Street. So
I hear you. 11 years ago, 12 years ago.
The realization of things happening, I'm trying to operate in the idea.
I'm with you.
You know.
Again, I appreciate it.
I don't know how many bands are going to play really well right next to a highway and a bridge, but that I mean.
Well, I think it's about what we can do out there, right? And this is one of many ideas that we're going to be continuing to talk about. And again, I thank you for doing it. And I think there's more conversation about your idea, more conversation about other ideas as well too in the future. So I appreciate it, though.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, Councilwoman Abear.
Thank you. Thank you. Great presentation. It's like Mr. Schmidt said, it's a great idea. I mean, it's just the beginning of thoughts that have come our way. I've had people, you know, sending, hey, we put an amphitheater there. Hey, can we put something like the venue they've got over in Fort Walton Beach where it's more like a 1-story building and then it's like the downward slope so you can put chairs and benches for people to enjoy the sunset. So it's physically for everyone to enjoy. So thank you for bringing your ideas to us. I mean, like I said, we haven't even closed the deal, but it's nice to see that there's some interest and some definitely nice talent work on getting all of that done with your high school degree in that. So thanks for bringing it to us. We appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Councilman Guile.
Thank you, sir. Hello, Mr. Green. How are you today?
Doing good, sir.
Wonderful. Do you have a brother, twin brother?
No.
Because I remember sitting right over there at a CRA committee meeting when you chastised me about paid parking, and now you're delving from paid parking into paid boat slips. So I don't know what's happened or what's changed your mind, but I mean, you threw everything but the kitchen sink at me and basically called, in rough terms, idiots for what we were doing, and now you want to delve into the marina aspect of it all over there. So I'm just kind of curious as to what changed your mind in all of this.
Well, I think that's a bit of embellishment, Councilman.
Crystal, you were right next to me. You heard it.
You know, also at that time, there was not every single place on the Harbor District was charging for parking. And since then has become the realization that every single one of them has, and some of them kicking and screaming. I think that upon observing all that, I don't think you're going to put the toothpaste back in the bottle. I think that once we started charging for parking, then that is now going to be a realization, whatever amount it becomes, but I feel it's going to be one. And I feel that also, you know, I spoke about creating more parking, period. So it was a culmination. This is bringing more parking, and it's also a safer place to park because you don't cross a single roadway to access the Harbor District. And as far as boats go and paying for them, to me, that's a little bit different. We're talking about power, water, we're talking about access like that. You have to charge something for a vessel. And the difference between having people pay for parking to go patronize an establishment or actually getting to keep their property on that in perpetuity of a contract, I think that's kind of the difference between paid parking and a paid boat slip.
Well, I will say there's parts of this that I do like. I'm kind of following Councilman Schmidt over there. There's parts I do, parts I don't. I'm very thankful to see there's not an ice rink in there, the hockey rink or anything
I can
like
put
that.
one in there really easy.
No. But, but I do like parts of this.
That wasn't part of the strategic plan, so I didn't include that in there. But I appreciate it, Councilman.
All right, up next is, it's got you, Councilman Destin.
Nice presentation, Jim, and a very interesting concept. And it's one that we'll certainly look at. I saw online today that this had generated quite a few numbers of ideas about what should go there. So it's probably going to be a long, drawn-out process, but it is one of the few places where something like this could go in Destin now. So look forward to considering it.
And I appreciate that. You know, that was one of my things, that this was definitely not going to be able to be a swimming area with the water flow and being that close to the bridge and stuff. So that's really why. And I understand there's going to be you're probably going to field a bunch of people wanting to put something different there. But I come here as also the chairman of the Harbor CRA and concerned with the funds going forward for the next 20 years and what we face in that district. So thank you.
No, that's a great point.
Destin.
Okay, Councilman King.
Thank you, sir. Jimbo, thanks for being here and putting this together. You know, years ago, we had talked about doing a city, I had brought up doing a city marina at visioning session 3 years ago. And it's something that's high on my radar. It's something I love. I think it's a huge need. This is awesome. You know, one of the things that I didn't get to run all the numbers from all the different city marinas and other places in Florida, but the numbers that this kind of thing could, and I realize there's 1,000 ideas out there. I think there's ways to incorporate all of them to make everybody happy. Just kidding. But, you know, I think there's ways that we can incorporate, you know, we can do multiple things on this property. I think a city marina idea is one, but if there's 30 or 40, how many boat slips you got here?
There's 41, including a pump out slip.
At an average of
1,500 a slip.
And that is conservative.
That is conservative.
I mean, that's a lot of money. That's a month. That's a month.
Well, no, the 750 would have been for annually. It would have been annually. So it would end up, whatever that ends up being. I don't have that number right in front of me, but, you know, 40 times 15.
Yeah,
so
62.
it would end up being about 50, 60,000. And that is a conservative number. Like, you know, most places in Destin have gone away from how big your boat is to the place you're occupying.
So, but to the point, I mean, it's income generating. I think that's huge for the city. I think that's not a minimum of 6 feet there. It would need a lot of dredging. I think that there's some reworking that could be done, but I'd like to, and I know this is maybe for another time, but if we could extend where you come up on Calhoun to 98, where you see that view. I mean, you can see from Calhoun, you could see every sunset over the course of the year, you know, from October or December to, you know, whatever. The sun moves. So, I mean, you get all kinds of range as far as sunsets go. So if there was any way to extend the elevation, that's a pretty high spot. If we could extend the elevation there and excavate parking underneath, I don't even know if that's possible, but I would like for that to be my idea if we do that. So I think it's awesome. I think it's great. I love the idea. I think you could charge a lot of money for this drawing. Jim, thanks for everything, man. This is great.
I appreciate it. And I didn't get to it quite because I didn't want to just sit up here and be a robot and read what I typed you in the report. But, you know, that observation platform, there's plenty of room when you're standing up there to expand that. It doesn't have to just be there. That's just what is existing. And there is. It's only about 15 feet off the ground at the furthest west point of it. So it would be very easy to create a much bigger pavilion and area for people to enjoy that. Yes, sir.
And then I guess this would probably be the best time to give you guys a little update at the TPO. So they are going to be fast tracking the PD&E study for the bridge. It'll be 3 lanes with 12-foot pedestrian pathways on each side, north and south. So you're really kind of getting more of this complete street theology of what this wide bridge is going to look like. So as we move forward, just for everyone's food for thought, it's going to be much wider, much higher, because the bridge is going to get raised so high that the arch of the bridge probably won't touch down till after where the intersection is right now. A second update being that they found that the feasibility of 3-laning the harbor is just too much to bear, and so it will stay a 2-lane each way highway, 4-lane, and not go into the 6-lane highway. So yeah, so now we're not looking at any 6-laning in the harbor district, and that was official as of the last TPO meeting of last week through the FDOT region. And then they are still very interested and aggressively moving forward with the revisioning of the Destin Bridge. So just as we move forward and we get all these amazing ideas, I think that'll be a pivotal structure that we cannot work around, will be how this bridge is positioned based on where the channel is and how high that channel needs to be, and then the grade that it will take to get inland to go back to zero. And then, so just wanted to throw that out there, and I think there was a third part, but I'm sure it'll come to me after Councilman Bagley.
Thank you very much, Captain. I really appreciate it. It's obviously a lot of hard work. I think I've made my position clear. I guess this is the comprehensive plan that was promised at the last meeting that was being worked on. Is this it?
No, that's not it.
That's not it, okay. Because, and I agree with pretty much what everybody said. You know, the marina part, I'm all in on that. I kind of like Johnny's idea of underground parking. I'm a tunnels guy. I thought the state told us we couldn't put the boardwalk underneath the bridge, but maybe I misunderstood that. But at some point, they told us we couldn't put it under the bridge. Maybe they changed their mind and we can. You know, FDOT putting the landing of a 6-lane highway in one of the worst intersections in Destin as it feeds into a 4-lane highway. And so I'm where I was 2 weeks ago. We need to have a charrette. We need an overlay district where we say, this is all the land we own. Because to Kevin's point, we have a parking area down at the bottom of the hill. We have, yes, something, maybe it's an all-glass building that provides a terminal vista, that we put the history, fishing and history museum, yeah, on maybe the north side, but it's all glass so you can see out into the harbor as you're looking at all the displays. There's 1,000,002 ideas. And yes, I want to see the tunnels, but I also want to fix, you know, one of Mr. Destin's top 2 things of the intersection at Stallman and 98, which now is going to be even worse. Mm-hmm. The good news about the bridge is that is public land, and if they put the landing there, hopefully we can get them to design the pilings and stuff so that we can put maybe parking or something underneath where the roadway is now. Wouldn't need a tunnel, it would just be cross. So there are a million ideas, but we don't have a plan to take in these ideas, have a conversation. So what I'd like the staff to do is to brief us next meeting on who is working this comprehensive plan, what area it encompasses, and what ideas are they looking at, and then we'll start sending it to the Harbor CRA, because I don't want a hockey rink out there either. I'll just be honest with you. And I see this now, after our $9 million investment, once we close, this will be our town center. So what do we want our town center to look like? I want some housing down there. Maybe it's public housing, maybe it's on some of the private lot, but I want to create a destination, not just in this space. And that's part of the problem is we keep looking at, well, this space and the Zerby space and the fishing museum space and the community center space and the parking lot space. No. If you think of it as a town center, what's it all going to look like when we pull it all together? So I thank you again. You did a lot of work, and I think some of your ideas will probably be incorporated in whatever we finally decide. but we got a long ways to go. But I want to know how, I at least want to see the map next time of, are we going to do workshops? Are we going to do, public hearings? What are we going to do to get everybody's input on what the future of that end of the harbor is going to look like? Thank you.
Thank you. And to piggyback on your thoughts there, FDOT seemed to be much more excited and approachable to work with us now that we potentially are going to own this land. Last quarter, they said they would happy to hold my hand, and this quarter, they were coming up asking and getting input. So I think potentially if we do close, that does give us a lot more leverage of creative ability with the bridge and how it can look far and beyond just the natural structure that it needs. And last part is that Gulf Breeze would be our next closest example of a city that owned land at the foot of a bridge, and Gulf Breeze got about $5 million for allowing them to get easements and do their thing, whether it was a closed deal or an easement deal. That was $5 million that they got. So obviously not apples to apples, but just for food for thought for everyone, that might come with a good down payment when they need some of our land if we keep things on the north. Yeah. All right, so seeing no other further discussions, thank you so much.
I just want to say thank you, and I also want to disclose that I strong-armed the staff to wait till Friday to release your packet. I told them that I would fall on that sword, so don't get mad at them for being late to releasing your packet. That was all my fault. So.
Well, we all appreciate that. All
But
right.
we control raises and pay, so.
All right, Lance.
Thanks, sir. Item 4E, staff is looking for council's guidance regarding the minimum stormwater management system requirements, specifically about the definition of vegetation. And I have Louis Nguzi to introduce the item.
Thank you, Manager, and good evening, Mayor and City Council members. The key element of any ordinance is to provide clarity to requirements, both to the public as well as to staff. Currently, our ordinance right now, as far as the definition of vegetation, is murky to say the least. And so I have asked our city engineer, in the interest of ensuring that we have clarity from you from a value standpoint, as well as a policy direction standpoint, to share his thoughts and get some feedback so that as we rewrite the LDC code, we both have a clear understanding which direction you want to go so that we can come up with those clear requirements. That will also apply to the next item that the manager will introduce. And so I'll let the city engineer share some thoughts on that, and looking forward to your feedback.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. I usually start with, are you ready to have some fun? Well, tonight, it's very technical, very dry, so I'll try to get through it as painlessly as possible. I do want to say that I'm going to try to cut down in the interest of time, so on the fly, I'm going to be changing this, so bear with me. And I do want to also say that I understand the property rights, but we are a city. We are a community. So little things can start to build up and cause a negative impact to a community. So I just want to be aware of that. And I want to put out there that I'm not against artificial turf at all. I just want to have us look at artificial turf when it comes to stormwater management systems. So like Louis said, our definition of vegetation in our code does not exist, and there is parts in our code that reference vegetation. For instance, in open space, it says a vegetative pervious surface, and then in the swale, it mentions that it needs to be stabilized vegetation suitable for soil stabilization, stormwater treatment, and nutrient uptake. And it also mentions that we need to reduce, oh boy, I'm getting old, I'm gonna need glasses soon. Reduce, can't read it.
Pollutant concentration of any
Pollutant
discharge.
concentration, yes. I should be good after that. It was just the highlighted. So if we look at our current code, there are references throughout the code for stormwater plans to vegetated, to vegetation, to sodding. There also is a mention in the environmental benefits to aid in heat abatement. So let's look at why is a stormwater system needed? The fundamental elements of a stormwater system has two things. We want a quantity, a volume of water stored on your site, and then we want quality. We want the water to be clean if it has to leave your site. Stormwater systems help reduce runoff, erosion, and pollution. So how does stormwater help? What does stormwater help protect? Helps protect yourself. Helps protect our neighbors, our harbor, bayou, bay, gulf, wetlands. So tonight, we're kind of asking for direction as to will artificial turf / synthetic turf remain in our current interpretation of the definition of what vegetation is. If we look at University of Florida, in your packet, you had the whole paper, but I just want to point out a couple different things. It does say that living turf grass provides a root zone to help filter and slow down runoff and stop erosion. It also points out that natural turf grass plays an important role in cooling the environment that synthetic turf cannot. And it says on average, the temperature of synthetic turf can be 70 to 100 degrees hotter than regular natural sod. It also mentions with fertilizers, if there's fertilizers that get into artificial turf, there's a lack of a root system, and it's a socio-microbial community to treat and filter and clean the water. So synthetic turf, according to the University of Florida's paper, does not offer any benefit that attract or support wildlife. If you think about it, with the synthetic turf gets so hot, it bleaches the soil underneath it. So it's going to kill the microbials. You're going to lose your bugs. You're going to lose your worms. You're going to lose everything, the insects. So there's nothing for birds to eat. So they're just going to go somewhere else. So it's not supporting wildlife. Environmental Protection Agency. It says infiltration practices are subject to clogging. So we do allow some underground stormwater systems. They're not the greatest, but it is a common method that's used. And in there, it stores the water. And over time, those systems get clogged. So it starts turning into an impervious surface. You can't pour a glass of water and have it go through that. And that's what happens over time if they're not maintained correctly. It says also in the Environmental Protection Agency, promotion of a vegetative cover will help maintain percolation rates, slow runoff velocity, and minimize groundwater pollution. Did reach out to Northwest Florida Water Management District and to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Again, those emails were included in your packet. They do both use the same applicant handbook volume 2. So in there it mentions a couple of things that are related to stormwater and vegetation. The one thing I wanted to point out in the Northwest Florida Water Management District email, it says that if a material is used that is not considered the standard, such as liner, semi-pervious, etc., the applicant would be required to provide additional pollutant loading calculations. And then in the DEP email, they do mention that synthetic turf does not have a natural vegetation or a root system to aid in stabilizing of nutrients, providing treatment, and water could potentially not infiltrate within 72 hours. So in our code, we require during a storm event to maintain the water on your site for 72 hours before it leaves the site. They also say that synthetic turf can be useful in small and well-trafficked areas where natural grasses would have a difficult time growing because of stable soil condition, foot traffic, or I'm gonna have to do this. All right, so sorry. I guess I'm getting older than I thought. So I'll just say, well, synthetic turf can be useful in small and well-trafficked areas where natural grasses would have a difficult time growing because of shade, soil conditions, foot traffic, or other causes. The use of synthetic turf grass could cause additional factors on a site that would need to be accommodated. What does that mean? That means if you're through DEP, if you're using synthetic turf, you need to offset the impact of that somewhere else on your site, maybe a bigger retention area. It also says the project will need to take into account permeability in the artificial turf and the substance, as a low permeability of area would increase the runoff volume and the rate of the site. So again, it's slowly going to turn into an impervious surface. Over time, you'll have more flooding to your neighbors, to the water bodies, to your public right-of-way. And then it says the washing and cooling of synthetic turf with water should be accounted for as a potential additional source of runoff volume. With the heat, if you're putting it in your backyard and it does get 70 to 100 degrees hotter than natural sod, and you're using it for your kids or your pets, that people are starting to water it to cool it down before they go out and use it. I did look at what our neighbors are doing. So if we go through and look at all the surrounding area, it talks about their stormwater requirements. The only one that really specifically mentions anything about synthetic turf would be Gulf Breeze. And in there, they do say that synthetic turf may be used only in areas where severe conditions prevent the use of other ground cover. So what actions have our other fellow cities taken when it comes to artificial turf? So the city of Orlando, this is included in your packet, they did a landscape code amendment in 2021. And in there it says that artificial turf does not offer any benefits of plants in a subtropical environment, such as abating the urban heat island effect. And that goes back to the beginning, the part that I couldn't read, that's in our code that we want to also do the same thing. It also says that while some artificial turf systems are designed with a permeable base layer, the 90% required compaction does not permit water absorption into the subgrade. So what does that mean? That means our natural ground, if we want to put artificial turf in, you have to go in and compact it, and then you put your gravel, then you put your artificial turf. Once you compact it, it makes it so that, yes, you can pour a glass of water on the turf, it'll go through that gravel, but it won't go past that layer. And then over time, like we talked about, this will get clogged, and it's just gonna end up being kind of an impervious surface. But I will say, when talking to Ms. Gregg, they did say that for the turf they're installing around town, they only require the compacted subgrade if it's a vehicular traffic area, so not in people's personal yards. Because artificial turf lacks the ability to filter stormwater runoff, setbacks are established to protect waterfront swales, and they do say that they prohibit the installation of artificial turf in swales. They also have a part that says non-vegetative materials, which includes artificial turf, may be used as an accent, but shall not be considered permanent landscaping and does not meet the intent of their code. They also say that artificial turf may not be installed within 50 feet of an artificial or natural body of water. And then finally, it says that the installation of artificial turf shall be calculated as an impervious surface, like we talked about, something that can't go through a hard surface. So the city of Marco Island passed a resolution in 2015. They actually had a very detailed rules for areas of use, installation, and maintenance. And a couple things I want to point out is the use of artificial turf on areas with a slope of percent greater than 5. This shall not be permitted. So what does that mean to us? Our current code is we allow 3-to-1 slopes for retention and swale areas. That's a 33% slope. So in this case, that wouldn't, artificial turf would not be allowed on that. I would say the reason for that would probably be because if you don't stabilize the natural ground and you get the water, a heavy flush of water through there, it could start undermining it on the slopes. The use of synthetic turf in public right-of-way or swales are prohibited. And then a drainage system shall be installed underneath the turf to prevent the excessive runoff or pooling. So they're going above and beyond, and they're saying if you're installing an artificial turf in your yard, you got to install a drainage system underneath that with the piping, like the systems that we allow right now. So let's look at the pros and cons of both. Artificial turf pro, there's low maintenance, lasts for years, and from what all I've read is it lasts about 10 to 15 years before you have to start thinking about replacing it. It's durable. It's customizable. It conserves water. Obviously, there's no fertilizers or pesticides needed. Reduces carbon emissions with, you don't need to mow it and that kind of thing. And can be used made from recyclable materials. The cons for artificial turf is there's a high initial cost and repairs. So if we allowed it in our right-of-ways, in our right-of-ways we have, the electric, the fiber, the water, the sewer, the gas, so on and so forth. If somebody comes through and needs to add something, repair something, whatever, it's going to be a higher cost to put that all back. It introduces a lot more plastics and rubbers to the environment, especially after a major storm event. So it's not really an if, it's when it happens. It will happen. And then it's going to wash microplastics, whatever the fill material is, into the harbor, the bay, the Gulf. Loss of wildlife habitat. So again, it's not encouraging wildlife habitat. If it's not properly maintained over time, it can become compacted and acted like an impervious surface, like we talked about. Potential of contaminated runoff from the site. So if you think about it, if you have a stormwater system that's artificial turf, and you have natural turf in your yard, and you get rain, it's going to come in and bring that contaminants from the natural turf into the artificial turf and sit there. It'll evaporate or perk out, and you got a layer of invisible contaminants. Over time, you can have multiple layers build up on each other. Once you get that big rain to flush and it overtops and goes into the harbor, into the bay, into the public right-of-way, into your neighbor or your house, it's going to be a higher concentration of contaminants inside that system that's going to flush out. It slowly kills soil nutrition. Like we talked about, it bleaches the soil with the heat. There's no nutrient removal. All nutrients would run off the site, like we just talked about. Microplastics leaching into the environment. Fertilizers and pesticides, like we talked about, if it gets washed into the system, it has no way of really getting cleaned. Lack of photosynthesis, obviously it's fake, so it can't do that process. Infill. We haven't talked about infill yet. So you've seen it in like football stadiums where it's got artificial turf. If a wide receiver catches the ball, drags his feet, you see the black pellets coming up. So that's a type of infill. When I talked to Ms. Gregg, she mentioned that they use 3 types of infill. You saw her here tonight. She can answer some questions about it. I'm not as in-depth on the infill part of it. But one of the infills that they use is the rubber, the crumb rubber. I'd assume in our white sand zones we don't want the black crumb rubber used. So at the very least, I would ask if we want to start kind of going through what types of infill are out there and which ones we possibly want to allow. For natural sod, pros. Offers an instant natural lawn with weed resistance, provides a natural look and feel, can be less expensive up front. Natural nutrient removal from the water, which improves your water quality, reduces soil erosion, reduces carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere with photosynthesis, reduces the heat island effect, keeps soil healthy for organisms and natural vegetation. A specialty contractor would not be required to install it, and easy to repair when needed, and reduces glare. For cons, it requires more maintenance than artificial turf. It can be more susceptible to damage from heavy foot traffic and pets than artificial turf. Obviously, we got the use of fertilizers and pesticides, and the water use argument is used, but with how hot it gets, and if you have pets that urinate back there, you gotta flush it. So you're using a lot more water than what people think right off the bat. So from my professional take on this issue, I would say it has its place. I'm not against it, but it shouldn't be in a stormwater system. So I have no problems with it being somebody's yard, but the stormwater system is there for a very important reason, to try to help not negatively impact our beautiful views around the city like this picture. But ultimately, it's your call. So I would ask, I guess, 3 questions tonight. Does City Council want to keep artificial turf in the definition of vegetation? If so, does Council want to allow artificial turf within stormwater systems? And if so, does Council want to have the City Manager direct staff to look into adopting specific rules similar to what other cities have done? I know it's a lot of information in a condensed time. You probably don't have any questions, but I'm here to answer.
My comment would just be, I like what the city of Marco Island did. So that's just quick response, and then first up will be Councilman Schmidt.
Appreciate it. I'll start with a motion, and then we can go into some discussion if that's okay. I'll make a motion to direct city manager to work with staff to update the code to allow turf to be used in the city of Destin.
I'll second.
Okay. Ryan, thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate it. I know you've been looking and working very hard on all of these topics, so I do appreciate it. I will say, though, when you start going through a lot of this, you know, unfortunately, the way I take it is you have a lot of articles and a lot of things that all talk about not using it. Until we get to the pros and cons, there's nothing in here that you're providing us that talks about the people really using it, which to me is kind of a one-way, you know, take on this, basically. You mentioned some things about the local company doesn't do stuff when there's cars on a driveway, what did you call it, the packed stuff, what they're packing in the ground?
So the only time they spec it to be compacted where it kind of is an impervious surface would be if there's vehicular use. on it.
Right, and so I guess my assumption would be most of these turf that people are installing are not in their driveway, but most likely in their yard, backyards, things like that. But maybe there are some that do it in their driveway. But I do think we also have, you know, the whole point of a permit process is to allow you guys to review, this is, you know, my layman terms, I guess, but to review what somebody's wanting to do, to make sure that it meets our code, and then to allow all the professionals. I recently did a renovation in my house. I had inspectors come by multiple times before we'll actually sign, seal, and deliver it, right? So there's a process, even if we use turf, like you said at the end, to make sure we're doing it in a reasonable way. And I think that's the approach that we should still be doing. We should work with, you know, the lady that was speaking earlier and anybody else to maybe work with those professionals that are in that industry that can provide that insight to us. You know, some of the pros and cons that are mentioned, I mean, we can nitpick all these all day long. You know, I'm spending nearly $2,000 on 6 pallets of sod now that hasn't grown. You know, from my understanding, I should get a permit if I'm going to bring in fill and put it on my property and then bring in natural sod. I should get a permit because I possibly will be changing the elevation of my yard. I guarantee you most people in the city of Destin don't really think about that or are going to do that. You know, so we start looking into the governmental overreach about what people can do. The pesticides, the herbicides, the Roundup. I mean, there's so many things that you have fertilizer as a pro and a con for artificial turf. You know, if you have artificial turf, I think what you meant by that was because the pesticides and stuff from the outside of the turf will come into that. I think that's what you meant by that.
Exactly.
And I get that, but I don't think we really talked about the importance of what you're reducing. You mentioned it. We're not going to be watering the things, the grass anymore. Sure, if a family wants to cool it down, they can spray it, but that's their choice to then, you know, run that water or not, but they're not going to let their kids play. But you're not going to be spraying Roundup inside of your yard to kill weeds anymore. That's going to go into the harbor or the bay or your neighbors. So I think there's not enough emphasis put on what the turf can bring. There's many places in the city that struggle drastically with growing grass. Holiday Isle is so sandy. That's, you know, most people on Holiday Isle that are doing this had no idea they needed a permit. You know, there's problems all around the city that we have that are an environmental impact. They're probably just as worse an environmental impact than some of these things that you're highlighting that we don't put the same focus on. But I just truly feel like we should allow property owners to make that decision through the permit process. You know, if they want to do it, they get a professional. He or she submits it. You guys look at it, make sure that it's okay. But ultimately, they can use turf in their yard if they want to use turf. So again, I appreciate it. But the side I'm siding on is to allow my neighbors and constituents to put turf in their yard pretty easily.
All right. Councilman Guile.
Thank you for the presentation. There is something that I kind of want to add is a little bit of information that may pertain to this that you guys might find kind of useful. I'm also part of FRSA, Florida Roofing Sheet Metal Association, and I don't know if you all remember, not too long ago, roofing, your insurance company could tell you to replace your roof every 10 years. We fought that, and we got that eliminated, and one of the reasons we fought it was landfill. During that study, we also found grass clippings are the third largest component in landfill, and there's very few landfills and space for approved landfills left. So I'll have to agree that I think that everything up until the very end was so one-sided that it's hard for us to put faith in your study so that we can make an educated decision. I feel like it's you trying to lead us along and to what you really want out of this. And to me, it's hard to get behind something like that. I also believe exactly what Kevin stated about government overreach. And there's certain portions of this, if it's not detrimental to somebody, maybe I'm putting my head in the sand, but if it's not detrimental, we shouldn't be going in there telling somebody what to do on their own property. But if you have something that you want to represent that's a little bit more inclusive, I'd be more than willing to look at it, whatever you got.
So I will say, I'm not aware of anything that artificial turf can do to help treat the water. So that's why it's coming across as one-sided. I'm not.
Yeah, I was going to
not
back you up and
sure
say,
that-
he looks like he's gone through every department that they've given an acronym
I've gone through
for.
the FDEP, I've gone through the district and asked them, and they're saying if you want to try it, you can do some nutrient uploading calcs and submit that to them if you're trying to get a permit through them, and they'll look at it. But in the one email from DEP, they said they don't believe that there's any way to provide that through artificial turf.
Yeah,
Okay, and you're saying that a stormwater drainage is meant to treat water?
Yes, your stormwater system. Yeah, your
It's
water
not just a direct in producing I mean, I understand kind of what you're saying, but it's not a final water treatment system. I mean, you want to see a water treatment plant, you go over there behind Airport Road and you can smell it. But I understand that that might be a minor role, but it can't be the prime root.
Where our wastewater
Discharge.
treatment plant does not treat stormwater.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, that's something that would treat water and purify, but this is more, I thought the main goal is to prevent runoff, it's not necessarily, the main goal isn't to purify water, from what I understand, unless I'm wrong. I mean.
This water. Yeah.
That's how the chemicals get into the bay and into the harbor, is through stormwater runoff. Okay, and you're saying that a grass root is going to eliminate that pesticide completely?
Yeah,
Well, then
root system. It's
I'm-
not just grass, just shrubs,
Then I
trees,
didn't
whatever.
understand that portion of it, and I appreciate you enlightening me.
Like I said, I went through it really fast, so I skipped through a bunch of stuff, but.
All right. Anything else? All right, Councilman Bagby.
Okay, so, and I agree with everything they said. You kind of, it was almost like you had your thumb on the scale right there till the last. I'm a naturalist, you know, I wrote the first tree ordinance. Yeah, I think the mayor and I are probably on the same page on this. I like the Marco Island thing. The grass does do a better treatment of stormwater, no doubt. It is a much better drainage system, but I also, and I don't want it in the right of way. I don't want it on a single inch of city property, period. But I've got friends over in Walton County, you know, their backyard's all artificial turf. They got their little putting greens. We go over there, we have a little contest, maybe a couple of adult beverages. Doesn't bother anybody, but I don't want it out in the swales where most of our water treatment occurs. I don't want it in, you know, in the city right of way. But I think we ought to allow it on private property. That's their call, you know. But if it's on their property, they've got to have a stormwater treatment system. I don't care if that's a French drain. I don't care if that's the big what do you call them, tubes?
Exfiltration.
Exfiltration tubes, you know, like we're going to put in the park. You have to have stormwater treatment. The water, You know, this is a water-based community, so it doesn't matter. I agree that you want to put it on your private property, put it, but somehow you've got to treat the stormwater. And as an example, Rosemary Beach, we required that you retain your water on your property. So all those houses that are about 6 inches apart, or it seems like they're 6 inches apart, they had to collect all their water on their lot and either treat it either in a French drain, which is what most of them use. Some of them use exfiltration tubes, pervious pavers. There are a bunch of ways so that they kept, you know, about 50% of their lot pervious or an equivalent thereof. And so what I'd like to do really is, there's a lot of expertise on water treatment and other things that need to be. I'd like to make a substitute motion that we send this to the LPA so that they and the staff can investigate and bring it back to us, something that captures the water treatment component. I'm not opposed to artificial turf in people's yards. They want to do that. Everybody in the city can do that. I won't do that because I believe in the water treatment, but I'd just like to send it to the LPA so we can get a little bit better information brought to the council before we make a decision.
Thank you so much.
That's a motion.
And do I have a second on the substitute? Motion and a second for the sub for LPA for further, and then you are up next, Councilman Destin.
That had to do with some of my questions. Do we have any kind of idea how much of it is being used in Destin? Is it, have we segregated out how many of our applications are using artificial turf? Is that something we can get out of our data in community development?
Yeah, I'm sure we could.
Okay, and I think I agree with Jim. It doesn't need to be in stormwater because it doesn't work. Stormwater systems. But as far as somebody that wants a little putting green in their yard, that's a little too far for me, for the government to be intervening. So if we could get that information to find out exactly, is it a big problem? Is it something we need to address? Then that would make me feel a lot better about regulating it.
Okay. City Manager, Lance.
Thank you. I was just going to clarify the original motion. I guess there's a substitute motion. We're good on that. But I do want to remind the council that currently at Captain Leonard Destin Park, we have artificial turf surrounding the splash pads. Full disclosure.
No. It's an accent feature, yeah.
All right, Councilwoman Aber.
Thanks, Mayor. Mr. Destin pretty much calculated what I was going to say, the fact that how many people we really got using it. I don't think we need to do government overreach and tell our residents you can't use artificial turf. I think it makes sense in a lot of these, areas. And I'm glad we've made a motion to move it on to LPA, let them figure it out, and tell us what, a better direction with that information that they'll be able to call. But I think if someone wants artificial turf in their own property, in their backyard, and they have a way of, creating some sort of a stormwater or French runoff, I see no reason why we need to continue with the government overreach and tell our residents what they can or can't put in their own backyard.
All right, Councilman Schmidt.
I appreciate it. I was going to say a couple things. One, about the right-of-way, expensive to remove it. Right now, we let brick pavers go in the right-of-way, and then if it has to be removed, it's the resident's responsibility to do that, right? Put them back and all that.
You're correct, yes.
Okay. Unfortunately, I disagree with Mr. Bagby and Mr. Destin about the LPA situation. I think this is a pressing matter. I think if Ryan, if this goes to the LPA, you're probably going to tweak the presentation. You're going to present it to them, and you're going to have the people that we have put on that advisory board to listen to your presentation, provide some ideas. You are one of the subject matter experts in the city of Destin on this topic. I don't think we need to go to LPA to have you do what you just did. It's a pressing issue because we have business owners that at one point were being denied permits. You have residents that are trying to do it, that are going to be impacted. So it is a pressing issue. It's a livelihood issue for her, maybe others, as well as the residents that are wanting to move forward with something. And as much as I respect our advisory boards and LPA and everything else, I think a decision can be made sooner than that to not prolong if it's impacting people's businesses and livelihoods and their own properties. And so I hope, I can't support that because we're just kicking it down the road, in my opinion.
All right, have I missed anyone? Jump on in for final decision. Yes, Councilman Destin.
One more question. At the moment, since we don't really have anything in the ordinances that are addressing this issue at all, are we denying permits?
No, there was an interpretation of the vegetation, the definition of vegetation to include artificial turf, so now artificial turf's being allowed. in
So then
the
that would
stormwater
allow you
system.
to have a permit?
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
so we're not denying permits to this lady?
Not,
anybody?
that all got cleaned up.
Can we clarify that just a little bit, maybe, if we want? Because I don't think that's 100% accurate and truthful, honestly.
What?
There was an initial interpretation made that artificial turf was essentially, I'm going to simplify it because it was more complicated, but initially there was an interpretation that artificial turf was not allowed. There was a bit of an outcry from some people in the public, and at that point there was a new interpretation where it was allowed if there was basically sufficient drainage. That's what we're going with now. So initially, there might have been some permits denied or not responded to right away, but ultimately, they were issued, and that's why the city engineer is saying they were issued, because ultimately they were. So at this point...
So at this point, between now and we get something from the LPA, then no one's going to be denied permits on the basis of the questionability of the...
I don't think the city engineer was comfortable with the new interpretation, so he came here hoping that you guys would weigh in and we would know whether to stick with our current interpretation or not. So maybe you want us, from what you're saying, to stick with it until
we get a
goes to
decision,
LPA.
yes.
I'm
I think
just-
that is not part of the motion, but it should be.
Yeah, the sub was.
No, because that's my whole question, is the stormwater treatment. So if somebody up here can answer, what's the standard for stormwater treatment if you're allowed to put in artificial turf tonight, then maybe we could approve it, but nobody can do that. That's why I want to send it to the LPA, because there are some technical definitions and standards that need to be established when we put this in the rule. And I don't know what you're using, but as long as nobody's not, as long as no one's currently being denied, I'd rather do it right than do it quickly. I guess that's my point.
Rebuttal.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that when permits are being submitted, that staff's clear on what we're doing. Are we going with the current interpretation in the community development, or are we going with pre-interpretation? I don't know. So I just want to understand if this is the motion we're doing, what you are doing on submitted permits. How does that process look tomorrow?
Councilwoman?
I agree with Mr. Schmidt. I think if we can allow, as long as they come in with a permit request and that it gets approved if they have that sufficient drainage until it goes to LPA. Otherwise, kicking it down the road, I think if we change the rules and we change the verbiage and it states, you can have artificial turf and here's the requirements for your drainage. And that's the rules, period, instead of putting this off to LPA so we can make sure that everyone continues to understand these are the rules, this is what we expect, and you can get your artificial turf. Is that agreeable to, instead of kicking this down to LPA?
You can vote no, and then we'll go back to the original motion, and that can fail too. All right, so I'm going to call the vote for the sub to bring this to the LPA to get technical advice and bring it back with your guys' stuff. I'm so sorry.
Can you or Louis or somebody answer what the interpretation tomorrow is going to be on permit requests for these decisions until we get back from the LPA if this motion passes? I just want to understand.
I believe the engineer, in talking to other engineers, has a stopgap solution at this point. We'll probably fall back to that until we go to the LPA.
just to be clear, I think what you're saying is artificial turf will be permitted until the LPA makes a decision regarding the drainage? That's the current,
No? What you said
left out the
5
drainage.
minutes ago.
Yeah, it's permitted as long as there is drainage.
As long as there's sufficient drainage, it's permitted. What I want from the LPA and what their job is to advise us, and the staff's job is to advise us on technically what that actual definition looks like. Because right now, it is, if the engineer says, yep, there looks like there's enough drainage on that lot, either there's a French drain, there's an exfiltration tube, there's a rain barrel, there's a something, then, okay. But that's not good enough for when you're permitting. And we ought to have an exact, precise definition so everybody in the city can go, I think I want to put in artificial turf. Oh, I got to have, I have to have a perk rate of X per hour so that I know the stormwater is getting treated. And I get a perk rate of X by having an exfiltration tube, 2 French drains, and a whatever. Okay? That's exactly what the LPA and the staff is supposed to do, and that's all I'm asking them to do. But right now, it's not any different. Whatever he says is either sufficient drainage or not sufficient drainage, because that's what you told us the policy currently is.
That's right. And the way I foresee proceeding, if council is good with it, is that we'll put together a proposed ordinance that would probably talk about French drains and exfiltration as options. We'll take that ordinance to the LPA, let them weigh in, modify it, amend it, do what they want to do, make a recommendation, and then bring it back to you. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine, but the bottom line is the stormwater has to be treated. That's the whole thing that grass does that artificial turf doesn't do. It treats stormwater, period.
So yeah, there's 2 parts to a stormwater system. It's
Yeah.
The volume of it.
Yeah.
And that's the easier thing to do.
Yeah.
And the treatment part.
Yes.
Ray, can you clear the vote real quick?
Would you like me to read the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Baggs' motion is to send this matter to the LPA so that the committee and staff can investigate and capture the water treatment component and bring it back to council. That's all I have.
And can you clear the vote? All right. Yeah, and we're voting again. All right.
Thank you.
Ayes have it, so moved. All right, Lance, my favorite one.
There we go. Next up, we have item 4F, a net positive environmental benefit fee. And we wanted to get some council direction on how to handle this that has been in place, I believe, since 1986. So I think Steve is going to take the lead on this one. So
Yes, sir.
Steve.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. A little bit of history on this real quick. I'll run through it fairly fast. The first mention when you search net positive environmental benefit fee in our ordinances is from March 24th, 1986. And just to give you a little bit of perspective, I turned 3 2 days later. So that, what's that? It's been around a little bit. So this is not the first time the city has dealt with this specific fee. When it was initially envisioned, it was a 25% fee on the valuation of the project. Since that time, the MPEB fee has been amended to clarify when the fee applied and how the fee was calculated, specifically now that it applies to pretty much everything marine related. And then it's calculated at the cost of construction, which is the cost of materials and labor, okay? Further, in 1995, October, the city and Florida DEP entered into an agreement through a memorandum of understanding that established an account for this MPEB fee to go into to help pay for the stormwater drains along the harbor. It was later amended to also include to help pay for the pump. And so that's where all the monies was going towards, okay? If you look at the agreement, the very last page, I believe it's in your packets, there is a motion from the Harbor Waterways Board to provide exemptions to this fee. And this is where staff believes some of the confusion with this fee started, is specifically with the very first exemption, where the exemption was to boat lifts, in that only new piles or replaced piles are what would charged the MPB was charged against, okay? I don't know the full history. I obviously have not been here this long, going on a little over 2 years now. Sometime between then and before I came on, the policy, and I have not found any written policy, I have not found an ordinance, staff, we have not found anything to say that the MPB only applied to piles. But that's how the policy, the MPB had been implemented sometime between 1995 and to the time that, that I came on board. As staff was looking to develop the fees in Compass, the MPB fee, applying it to just piles, was a very difficult and arduous task to do. So it became a manual enter based on the number of piles that were declared on the permit. However, staff did a bit more digging, and like stated earlier, there's no ordinance change, there's no policy directive recorded that states that the MPB only applies to new or replaced piles. So staff reverted to what the ordinance says, and that is that the MPB applies to all projects that are permitted or allowed per the ordinance. So that's how staff moved forward about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, once Compass was fully implemented. So when looking at that further, looking at the comprehensive plan policies and the clear language of the MPB fees in the Land Development Code, that's where we are now with this MPB fee. Obviously, it's created quite a bit of stir in the community, understandably. And staff is not ignorant nor deaf to that. And so we have provided several options here for discussion, and we're open to whatever direction council wishes to take. I'll kind of breeze through some of these options, or the 4 options that are provided in your staff report. First one is stay the course. 25% fee, MPB fee applies across the board, everything, boom, that's it. Number 2, staff's recommending to try and strike a balance for the MPB. The initial project, like a brand new project or a complete rebuild, gets the 25% MPB fee applied to it. Any repair thereof, some lesser percentage. We have 10% in here just to throw it, see if it sticks to the wall, but amenable to something else. The third would be to apply 25% to the first project only, and no MPB fee would be applied to any project thereafter, unless again it's a complete rebuild or a brand new project in all. And then the fourth one is to get a recommendation from the Harbor Waterways Board to bring back to the council for further guidance and direction. With that, I'll sit here for questions from anyone.
Councilman King.
Thank you, sir. I just would like to make the point that I was born 3.5 months after this was put into effect. So, but I wasn't here last meeting, so I apologize if I. It wasn't up. No. Okay. You know, I would just like to say that I don't know if longshoreman's insurance was a thing in 1986 or if what marine construction looked like, but I can assure you it didn't cost anything near what it does now. So 25% then and 25% now look very different. And that's all I got. Thanks.
All right.
Make the residents feel old.
Kevin Schmidt.
Steve, thank you very much. A couple of follow-ups with some comments that we've received and as well as we heard.
How old were you in March 24th, 1986? I mean,
I was younger than him. I wasn't even born yet, so I'm winning right now. Bobby's ultimately winning.
If you make a comment, you got to state how old you were.
Yeah, I wasn't even born yet. So, the comment about we added the canals section to something.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I missed that. I skipped over that. My apologies. So when you're looking at the LDC ordinance, it does not state canals adjacent to. However, when you go to the schedule of fees and you look at the impact fees, physical environment, it clearly states that this fee applies to all properties adjacent to the harbor and all properties adjacent to canals that directly impact the harbor.
So why do you think the LDC would have been that way, but then the schedule of fees was separately?
Couldn't tell you, but the schedule of fees is an ordinance-based document or a resolution document that council made a very clear directive to implement. So.
And the ordinance, the original ordinance was when, you said?
March 24th, 1986.
And that's the ordinance that you're talking about when you're comparing the schedule of fees to?
No, the schedule of fees was found so a year and a half ago when we're going through all this piles versus 25% thing, the staff hadn't seen the schedule of fees language. And so at the time, we weren't applying the fee to any properties in the canal because the ordinance, the LDC, says only the Destin Harbor. And then there was the controversy, not the controversy, but the disagreement or argument as to whether or not the canals actually were owned by Holiday Isle or others. The state, in certain circumstances, doesn't recognize canals as state waters. Only in certain circumstances they do that because canals are generally dredged upland. So there's all that sort of stuff. So staff didn't apply the 25% to properties in the canal for that reason.
Cool.
When we're doing more research in this fees or the schedule of fees, staff came across that little blurb and the light went off. Staff then went back to several other previous iterations and it was in there continuously.
Thank you. So I've noticed the schedule of fees is a very lengthy document. It's a very lengthy document altogether. When you take each schedule individually by department or whatever you want to call it, it's very lengthy still. So I can only imagine how that could have happened. And so I appreciate the discussion now and possibly to clean that up. I do agree, Mr. King brought up a good point about 25% today versus 25%
Absolutely.
30 years ago is a tremendously different amount.
40.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think there definitely needs to be something done there. And I hope to hear from Mr. Destin because I know he's very educated on the NPEB. And he will be the longest, possibly the oldest one. I don't want to say that, but so I'm looking forward to these two guys down there as well.
All right. All right. Councilman Bagby.
Yeah, I was 2.5 months, 3.5 months from being married, okay, on this date. So I was at Fort Polk, Louisiana, probably in the field somewhere. I don't have a problem modifying, the second or any reoccurring. I'd like for the Harbor Waterways Board to tell us, what that number ought to be, 10%, 15%. I don't have a problem with that. I do think we ought to include the canals. This is tied to the previous agenda item. This is all about water quality in this city and how we're going to maintain our water quality. And I don't want to get into saltwater intrusion. I don't want to talk about the Florida aquifer versus the other the sand gravel aquifer, but we can go on for hours, but it's about the thing that will determine Florida's future is fresh water. And if you don't understand that, you need to move someplace because it is being encroached on all the time, from saltwater intrusion, from not treating runoff. You see the vegetation that's grown in the bay in some places. That bay, if you look at the aerial maps just of the Sandestin area, and you look at how the dirt, the stuff that's been pumped in that bay has corroded the water quality of our bay. It is just, over the last 30 or 40 years, it's amazing. And I'm sure Mr. Destin probably has personal memories. But it's about having the money to treat the water. And so, Crystal, we'll go back to the money. How much are we budgeted to bring in this year and next year in NPEB?
I have that almost at my fingertips here.
I know you do.
Over the last, it's been actually, you don't have them handy, do you? I sent them to okay, quick, where's the email I sent to Steve with the whole history?
What years are you looking for? I've got back to
This
2006.
year and next year.
So for this year to date, we've pulled in $49,918. Next year, I don't know what we're projected to have.
Yeah, it's a really, it's a tricky one to.
Is that on new construction or repairs?
That's both, because currently the MPEB is applied to new and repairs.
Okay. And so what I would tell you is we've replaced that harbor pump, I believe, 3 times since I first got sworn in 2006. And that $49,000 a year ain't going to get you a new pump every 6 to 7 to 10 years. Hopefully this one will last longer. And that's not even counting all the other stormwater treatment facilities that we have to do in accordance with the MOU that we signed with the state, okay, or Northwest Florida Management District. I consider them the state. So the numbers have to work, because if you're getting the benefit of the good water, I don't think you ought to ask the people that live over on Ridgewood Circle to pay more in property taxes so that we can keep the stormwater systems working and effective just for the harbor. That's, we maybe pay a little bit, but we need to make sure we're covering our costs or close to it.
So just for a little bit of perspective, since 2006, the fee has eclipsed $20,000 1, 2, 3 times, 4 times this year.
All right, Councilman Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. Believe it or not, instituting this fee back in 1986 was quite controversial. A lot of the old people who had docks were vehemently opposed to it, and I was about to be run out on a rail several times for saying that we should support it. And it was always and finally accepted to be directed at new construction. And it was never intended to be applied to reconstruction. Matter of fact, it has the exact opposite effect that we had desired. As materials have matured and become more environmentally friendly, we went from pilings soaked in creosote to pilings and new things that are not nearly as awful, to boards that are made with material that is not going to rot, to pilings that are made, the Enviro pilings now that I put in on some of my docks. They don't leach anything in the water. So as we go forward and people replace these old really nasty materials with new, not nearly as nasty materials, to bang them for 25% is counterproductive. Yeah. And so I would suggest that we do send this to Waterways. We sold it as new construction. It made sense. I think if we looked at the if we looked at the breakdown between new construction and repairs, we would find that the great majority of it is new construction, so we would not affect that part of it. But my recommendation, you know, if I were going to have my way, I'd say don't apply it to repairs, especially not repairs that are using new materials that are not nearly as onerous to the environment.
I love that part.
But I don't mind sending it to the Waterways Committee to let them hopefully come to that same conclusion. So I'll make a motion that we send it to them for review and come back to us.
All right, seconded by Bagby. We got a couple more discussion here. Up first, Councilwoman Aber.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Destin, for clarifying that you were part of the initial.
He didn't say how old he was.
He said he was part of the initial start of this fee, which I think we just clarified. We just clarified that it was meant for new construction. And we all know that, like you said, with any repairs now, 99% of what they're repairing it with is very water friendly, is exactly what we want them to do, is pull out the old stuff and put in the good stuff. So I'm very glad you voted it to go to, or recommended it go to the Waterways, because I feel like they'll back it, and I think it'll make it a lot more sense, and it'll take care of those residents of ours that we're trying to ensure that they do fix and upgrade and take care of what needs to be done and put in the newer, more friendlier materials. So I agree, and I'm ready to go vote.
Councilman Guile.
One of the disadvantages of this button is after you've heard everybody else say exactly what you say, you just got to.
You got to do what Councilman Schmidt does, and you just put it first, and that way, if you don't need it, you just go
he's
ahead,
quick.
and you
He's
got
right
first
on the
dibs
ball.
regardless.
But yeah, I agree, board for board replacement, I'm with.
Councilman Bagby.
Yeah, I just want to echo for the Harbor Waterway Board, there should be a component if it's an eco-friendly replacement with a material which they should have the expertise to identify. But if they're trying to put creosote posts, and you and I are probably the only two that know what creosote posts are. No? Oh, okay, good. Oh, okay. Were you three? Third. You know, then that fee ought to be different. But if they're replacing it, we ought to incentivize them to do advantageous to the environment upgrades in their replacement. Thank you.
I cannot agree more. That's fantastic. Call the vote.
Let's do this.
Yep, this is what you get for not having a bathroom break. Sorry, guys.
I'll tell you a story. while
When's
we're
the next Harbor and Waterways meeting? Just curious while we're waiting.
The 28th.
Monday? Will this be able to go to them, or does it have to be publicized?
Yeah, we'll take it for discussion on Monday, and then we'll publicize it for their formal recommendation at the September hearing.
Well, if you guys would do a damn bathroom break every now and then, maybe.
All right. Ayes have it. He's got to time it better. All right. Now for my actual real favorite topic for the night. Lance, take it away.
Thank you, sir. Item 4G, staff is looking for a recommendation from council regarding the future pickleball courts. And as you should, I hope you're aware, the Aquatic Center has withdrawn from being a place where we could have potentially put some pickleball courts. So we're basically down to the option directly across the parking lot from where we are right now. And we have two design options being proposed, and that's the direction we're looking for from council. And Jeff Kozad and Ryan can answer any further questions that you might have about that.
All right, so Councilwoman Aber.
I'd like to make a motion that we direct the city manager to go ahead and start the process to develop the pickleball courts on our own land.
A or B recommendation?
Yeah, I don't have that open.
So do you want? Yeah, I was,
I'll read B so it's official.
I didn't want to be biased, but I was going to push her.
I move that we accept the proposal from Jenkins Engineering to design and permit the pickleball complex parking addition and improvements and additional survey work, a lump sum amount of $51,400.
Got a first and a second, Councilman Bagby?
I just would like to see us have two of the courts covered. I don't care if it even costs us one court to cover two of them, having been outdoors both days this weekend. It was brutal, and I cannot imagine those courts getting used without some, they don't all have to be covered or indoor or anything, but at least cover a couple of them.
Councilman King?
Thanks. Yeah, I realize that we're going to have, we can for sure do the 4 courts. My recommendation would be that and I know this may be premature, but that we push the design to be potentially accommodate 6 more courts, or however many more courts we decide if we want to do an Opelika deal where we have 75 courts, but covered with lights, misters. But I would like to see that we design the plan around the addition of more courts when the time comes.
Awesome, thank you. Councilman Schmidt?
I'm just going to ask that one of these 2 ladies over here gives me lessons whenever it's all said and done. They've been
Me
here for
too,
a long time.
me
And the
too.
second thing I'll ask is for Tamara after this meeting,
Yeah.
that one of the biggest things that comes out of tonight's meeting is this pickleball, so the whole world knows where we're going after tonight. Not that we're building a Destin Bridge or something like that, okay? So, thank you.
Kyle? And then since we're going to go, let's vote first. So calling the vote for option B. We're going to go big. All right, ayes have it, so moved.
Yay. And the pickleball ladies are
Awesome.
clapping.
And I guess there is a new advisor at the USA Pickleball that can help us if we want to get into some technical work. Other than that, I'll connect you guys for that. And it's free, look at that. Other than that, me and Jeff are working on a FERDAP grant. Never get to promise anything with a grant, but hopefully we can cover at least the $50,000 that it's going to cost to do this first phase of design. And dare I say, put a skate park in the other half of the park. Working on that too. All right, stay tuned. But we got the pickleball, that's all that matters tonight. Lance, take it away.
Very good. Just a few announcements. There'll be a mobility plan public workshop on Tuesday, August the 29th at 5:30 p.m. in this room, and the public is invited and encouraged to attend. We had a film crew in town last weekend that was...
If I can interrupt you real quick,
Yeah,
sorry.
please.
Is that going to be in regards to that big neighborhood presentation with the options, the mobility plan? Is it like when we talked about putting boards out and things like that?
No, this is, if you recall previously, we did a study for all the streets and roads in the city, tied up to how we're going to pay for new infrastructure associated with them. And you asked us to go to the committees as well as the public to get input so that you could finally rank the top 14. So this is
That's the
all
one about like putting in new roads and new accesses?
Yeah, right. And all the safety issues that we've been raising in here for a number of months. And so that plan addresses all the streets in the city, and we need a ranking of which ones to focus on and which ones go down the list. So it has nothing to do with the big picture part. Am I making sense?
I just want to make sure I wasn't mixing up the
No,
meetings with
those are two
having
different-
boards out here. Mr. Bagby talked about putting suggestions in in boxes. Is that what we're doing?
No, that's for the big picture.
Okay.
That's separate.
All right, thank you. I just want to clarify. Appreciate it. Sorry, Lance.
That's good. We had a film crew here in town last weekend that was arranged through the TDC, so our Public Information Department is working with them on pushing out information regarding scuba diving and snorkeling in the area. City offices will be closed on Labor Day, and the next city council meeting and the first budget hearing are scheduled for Thursday. I'll repeat, that's Thursday, September 7th at 5:30 p.m. As many of you know, Destin Water Users does occasionally have to restrict the reclaimed water flows, and right now Morgan Sports Center is on a 3-day restriction. So if you notice the grass not being quite as lush as usual, it's just because we haven't got as much rain as we usually get. So we're hoping for some rain. Yeah, right. Proposed resurfacing of Vintage Court and Vintage Circle is scheduled to start around September the 12th. And finally, the city has received and is in the process of assembling and installing 6 pairs of pedestrian crossing signals, one of which will be located at the intersection of Main and North Lakeside Drive. The other 5 will be installed along Scenic 98 per the recommendations of the Public Works and Public Safety Committee. And that's all I have. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. And at this time, if you voted for the over of the time, you're the winner. It is now 9:15. Inside joke we're coming up with up here. All right, going into public hearings. Kim.
This is ordinance number 2310 LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending Article 7, zoning and regulatory controls of the Land Development Code, changing the list of permitted conditional and prohibited uses to include luxury motorhome resorts as a conditional use in the Town Center Mixed-Use Zoning District, amending Table 7-2, Table of Allowable Uses, including conditions and criteria for approval, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. This is second reading.
Thank you so much. And seeing that this is a public hearing, at this time, I will accept any public comments for this specific public hearing. Crickets in the audience. Closing the public comments, and I will entertain a motion.
I'll
at
move
this
to
time.
approve ordinance 2310 LC on second reading.
We have a motion
Second.
with a second. Seeing no further discussion, call the vote. All right, ayes have it, 6-1. Well, Kim, take it away.
Okay, ordinance number 2311 CC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending Chapter 13 of the Code of Ordinances, Section 13-40, Schedule of Fees to reflect that the schedule of business tax receipt fees are currently set forth in the city's fee schedule resolution and as such shall be removed from the Code of Ordinances, providing for findings of fact, providing for incorporation into the Code of Ordinances, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. This is first reading.
Thank you so much. And seeing that this is a public hearing at this time, if you have any comments to make on this specific topic, this is your time to do so. Seeing none, closing the public comments, and I will entertain a motion at this time.
I'll move the city council approve ordinance 2311 CC on first reading and bring back to council for second reading on September 7th, 2023.
Second.
Motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion, calling. Thank you so much. Ayes have it, so moved. Thank you so much, Kim. I think Kyle's still a little bit faster of a reader than you, but we'll get there.
Okay,
Just
now
a little bit.
now it's a
He-
competition.
He got you by a little bit.
I like
But-
to articulate slowly for the public.
You know what? Repetition, I'm sure you'll get there. All right, going down. Councilman Guile, you got anything for us tonight?
Yeah, I have people emailing me questions, so I'm going to ask. Where are we at with the Crosstown Connector?
3B.
3B?
3B. Trying to figure out where to get that 4 or 5 million.
We're trying to get that, so that's it? That's what we're on hold on right now?
I think.
Okay, the last one, Noriega Point project crossovers the bathroom. On the Noriega Point project, the crossovers, the bathrooms. I don't know what that means, so let's just ignore that one. He didn't make that very clear.
With that, I mean, is this update for the road, or we just keep rolling?
I didn't hear a question. Was there?
I don't even
So
understand it
I will give you an
myself. He
update.
said Noriega Point crossover the bathrooms, but I don't know what that.
Probably
Okay,
the
so.
pro-
project,
yeah.
the crossover.
So just update on where we're at with Noriega Point.
So the update is that at the September 7th City Council meeting, which is on a Thursday, you guys will get a proposed extension of the road construction agreement. It will go from it was 9 months from permitting, which would have ended in September, next month, so now it's extended to the end of the year. And that's for the road construction for the Gulf Shore Drive extension. But then we have heard from DEP, because everybody's coordinating since the construction of the park is contingent on the completion of the road. DEP has confirmed that that's not going to slow down their commencement of construction at the beginning of next year. So Holiday Isle has been notified, the HIIA and their attorney and so on, and everybody knows.
And thank you for all the staff in that. I know that was something I was trying to push and do, so thank you guys for following up with that.
Thanks.
That's good.
All right, Councilman Destin. Bagby.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Councilwoman Aber.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Nothing from me, thanks. I'm sorry, guys.
Kevin can take my 3 minutes.
We are here, to do some things. Just a couple quick things. One, we kicked off the Destin Dolphins Football League, and my son is participating for the first time, as well as 100+ other kids, so congrats to all of them. This is a new adventure for our family. So, second, I was doing some research on some TDC stuff, and maybe Ms. Councilwoman Aber can help. I spoke with Jeff, and I spoke mainly with Jeff about this, but there is, our application that was submitted to the TDC came with 2 projects. One was $750,000, this is for this upcoming fiscal year, $750,000 project for the interlocal for the advanced funding request for the beach payback, I believe. And then the other one was $700,000 for beach and boardwalk operations. The item that brought some concerns and questions is, at least for the past couple, 2 to 3 years, we've heard from citizens about what happens at the county beach, at these beaches and these parks. And one in particular is about the little adventures operations, about their building, about how they use it, what they use. There was an item that was considered a condition, and on the front page it says the condition is to allow Little Adventure promotions at the facilities. And previous to this, seeing this, I believe this council has never really officially approved that certain activities by the county, TDC, Little Adventures are guaranteed or will be allowed or can happen. I believe most of the conversations we've had up here is to, make sure you work with us, come talk to us, and then we'll work together to what's going to be allowed out there. So I have some concerns with this document being a signed, sealed, delivered piece of paper that I think gives the TDC full authority to use these parks for Little Adventures. If I'm wrong in that interpretation, city attorney or whoever, or Jeff can provide some clarification, but if I'm not wrong, I'd like to ask, I guess Lance, this would be you or whoever you think, to clear this up, to make sure that we are handling it now, rather than 6 months
When
next
it's
summer
our
when there's a
fault.
big building out there and they come and say, well, we told you guys that we were gonna do it. So I'm just trying to be a little bit proactive in clearing this item. And maybe this is not a big deal at all, but it's just filed with everybody, and I think it's got a lot of red writing on it and signatures, so.
We do have a TDC meeting tomorrow morning that I will be at. And I think if Lance would like to, can come, we could probably get Jennifer to come and address the council at one of our meetings here very shortly, so we can clarify what the expectations are of what they had discussed with our city a few months back before these.
I personally,
were
she's
purchased.
more welcome coming anytime she wants. I think she was gonna start coming every quarter, which hasn't happened, but she doesn't need to make a presentation, in my opinion. I think Lance can get with Jennifer or whoever, Craig Coffey or whoever, to clear this up, would be my hope. But I don't know if we all want a motion, but I'm hoping that we could just get some clarity on that item. So, is that okay? Is that Lance? Can you do that, or is that a? Yeah, okay.
I don't know what the benefit of surprising this issue at the moment is.
Well, I hear you. I guess it's the concerns that we hear from people often about the activities that are being taken part out there. And so rather than dealing with it, for example, as some of you may or may not know, there's signs that get put up overnight and they, things happen because of maybe not some clear communication possibly. And I'm just trying to hope that we can stay in front of it and just clear it up before it blows up possibly. But that's my thought. I'm not going to make a motion, and if somebody wants to do something about it, we can. If not, no big deal. That was it. I think so. Thank you very much.
Of course. Councilman King.
Just one quick thing. There was some, I don't know if this is there was some car break-ins off Indian Trail. I told Troy about this. I know that we can't do anything about it, but just make everybody aware there were some there were some break-ins into some cars were stolen, so lock your stuff up. Sorry to scare everybody, that's all I got.
All right, good deal. I have nothing tonight. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, public comments. You made it this far. Yes, sir. First come, first serve. Name and address, and you got 3 minutes.
Entertaining, exciting, thank you. Great job. It was interesting.
I'm glad someone's getting paid.
Stephen Sanford, Lamar Advertising, Vice President, General Manager. Was before you June 20th and talked about the billboard proposal with the partnership between the Lamar Advertising and the City of Destin. You directed us to present for 3 committees, and we are going through that process, but the process has been a little lengthier than expected due to lack of quorum and some other committees that we were directed to present to. So I wanted to come back, make sure that you guys knew where we stood on it, and let you know that we're still here, still working in the community, and hoping to meet with you individually to clarify any other questions before the next time we get the opportunity to present. But we received very favorable response at Public Works and Safety on July 18th. A unanimous yes in support of the exchange plan. Not only that, but they also had recommended we keep one of the boards in the Harbor District, which was a surprise to us, obviously, and not something we'd have to twist our arm to do. But that was something that was recommended from the Public Works and Safety Committee. The LPA presentation on 8/1, we were hoping to get in front of. We were directed to present to Parks and Rec first, and the Town Center CRA. On Wednesday, August 9th, we presented the Harbor CRA. There was no quorum. We did a workshop. We received very favorable comments from Captain Jim, and it was a good, but we will be back in front of them again on September 13th. The Town Center CRA Board, we presented on August 16th. A unanimous yes in support of the Lamar plan, and things are moving ahead, and we're still working out there in the community, still excited about it, and was excited to hear some excitement about the sign at the property that was purchased earlier that is hoped to be purchased later this year. So just wanted to come, say hello. We'll be back, and if there's any questions, please, we'll be reaching out to all of you to hopefully meet again and make sure that we can be a great partner in the community. Thank you.
I've got a quick question before you go. You said you have to present to the Parks and Rec. I think the only thing that this council recommended was Harbor CRA, LPA, and Town Center, right? Safety. So who threw up Parks and Rec? Who asked you to report to Parks and Rec?
That was.
We did. I thought you said all our committees.
No, there's no reason to wait for Parks and Rec. I mean, take that one off.
I just recall asking the city attorney and manager to negotiate or something with you guys. I don't even recall the committees, to be honest, but, I don't recall exactly what was done, if we want to maybe have somebody look at it.
No, I think we should, because we only, the council here only gave 3 committees, if I remember right, that they had to visit, and that was
I
several
think it
months
was
ago.
LPA, Harbor, CRA, and Town Center.
Well,
CRA.
safety was one of them, I know
And
that, so
public
maybe it was
safety.
the 4th. So, yeah, if you've got those 4, I think we're ready. Not tonight, obviously.
He
but-
didn't have a
Right,
quorum
well,
for him.
unfortunately, we were pushed back to present to the LPA because we were told on August 1st, Steve O'Connor told us that he had been given directions to take the presentation to Parks and Rec Committee for their recommendation.
Well, it wasn't from this council, so I
And so-
don't,
and so
it's
that-
not what we voted on.
Now we'll go back. We are scheduled to present to Parks and Rec tomorrow,
I don't think that, well, yeah, as a courtesy, go ahead then.
and we'll do that. And the,
But if they don't have a quorum tomorrow, he doesn't need to wait to catch him again. Am I right? I mean, this is not fair to him that he's going to committees and there's not a quorum in twice.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, I'm next.
Marcy Gregg with Forever Lawn. I want to call the council's attention to the City of Destin's Land Development Code 10.03.02, where it is mentioning that the following construction activities are exempted from city review requirements of section 10.03.02, new single-family or duplex dwellings, or the addition of impervious area to an existing single-family or duplex dwelling, and then it goes on to proceed. So the way that I am reading that report, and based off of the comments of the council earlier, if it is in someone's backyard, there's huge room for discussion between what is in the code and what the code would like to be based off of staff's interpretation of it. So I would like to request the ability to present to both the City Council and to the LPA based on documented reports and findings from both the Synthetic Turf Council and the University of Princeton.
And your man is right there, Ray Bailey. But he'll give you information and our PIO, and that way you'll get the 5 minutes. You'll give us everything in advance. We'll see it before the meeting, and then the floor is yours for the presentation.
Thank you. Sounds wonderful.
Thank you.
Sandy Trammell, 3823 Indian Trail. I had the pleasure of meeting with the Chamber of Commerce this past weekend and the women who launch, and we had an hour and 45-minute discussion, and one of the things that came out of that was number 1 Harbor, and had we purchased it yet, and we were in the process and all that. Their recommendation was that you have public charrettes on what to do with that, not just try to determine it based on 1 person or 2 people or 4 people or 7. But anyway, I just wanted to make that clear. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Everyone's here just for entertainment value. I appreciate that. All right, with no other public comments, I will close this meeting.
Woo! 9:30.